All right, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Monday, May 13th. It is scheduled release week, an exciting time to be an NFL fan, to be a Giants fan. We find out where the Giants are going and when, how their opponents stack up on that schedule, who they'll have to face down the stretch if they're in the hunt. Are they playing internationally or not? Just an exciting time, especially because we know this is the spring offseason program when the team is starting to take shape on the field in East Rutherford, New Jersey, out of rookie minicamp. Now the full team getting together for OTAs, the June minicamp, and on into training camp come July. But it really starts to take shape that it's not just going to be your team on the field come the fall. It comes into focus that there are going to be opponents, rivals, division foes that you're going to have to take down and beat, teams that you've been struggling to knock down consistently in recent years going into a big season. And we know from these first 2 years of the Brian Dabol, Joe Schoen regime that when it comes to the schedule, it really has had a lot to do with the fate of the team, how the Giants have started, right? Had a lot to do with how they started 6-1 in 2022 with that playoff berth, their first playoff berth since 2016, playoff victory over the Minnesota Vikings on the road that season before bowing out. But the start is what did it for the Giants before skidding to a finish. I believe it was 3-6-1 in that season, but starting as hot as they did, Brian Dabol going for 2 in Tennessee in week 1 and setting the tone had everything to do with him winning Coach of the Year and how that year finished. And then you contrast that with 2023, how that season spiraled immediately, beginning with a 40-0 loss to the Dallas Cowboys at home at MetLife Stadium, injuries to key players such as Andrew Thomas, and on and on. We don't have to revisit that. But again, the schedule coming out, taking shape, and it really starts to solidify for fans and for the Giants team as they're preparing for opponents, how they're going to be getting off to a good start, who they're going to be facing. You get to start game planning specifically, especially for that week 1 opponent, and repping consistently some skills and plays and calls and strategies that are going to help you win that week 1 game, hopefully, and get off to that strong start. But we're not just here to talk about the schedule. We're also here to talk about the rookie minicamp in East Rutherford, New Jersey. I was there at the Giants facility on Friday and Saturday of rookie minicamp. 1 indoor practice with the rain, 1 outdoor practice. A great chance to see all of these players from draft picks to UDFA signings to tryout players, even veteran tryouts. Watch them move around. Who looks good, who's dropping passes, who's not, who's blocking well, who's not, where are guys lined up. All of that I can bring straight to you guys, my own eyes and ears. And also, we're always going to bring you transactions, news, whatever we have. A minor one coming out of rookie minicamp, but nevertheless, undrafted defensive lineman Elijah Chapman. He was a tryout out of SMU at minicamp. He ended up signing with the team, and the team waived outside linebacker Jeremiah Martin today as we speak here on May 13th. So that is the one transaction so far to come out of rookie minicamp. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some other observations I had on the field about Brian Dabol, his staff, and their process, and we'll answer all of your questions as always. First, going to tell you about BetOnline, and then we'll get right into your questions. BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And as we roll into your questions here, I wanted to announce as well, especially for our loyal listeners, that on Wednesday night for the schedule release, so that's Wednesday, May 15th at 8 p.m., I am planning a special live chat for the schedule release. So we all know that's an exciting time when the Giants and the NFL schedule comes out. And I will be here right with you guys to break it down live here on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard YouTube channel at PL on NFL. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button while we are live, those thumbs up, those likes. That helps drive engagement, and it tells the Giants fans out there who don't know already that we are here and that we are talking Giants not only as dedicated followers, fans, and listeners, but also as the New York Daily News Giants beat writer and NFL columnist since 2016 covering this team. I now have a deep knowledge and deep context for this franchise, this roster, and being there daily can bring you the insights from my own perspective. And I appreciate all of you contributing to this, as always. This really has become a fun and reciprocal community. And I really love all of you guys, what you bring here, what you bring to these podcasts, to these lives. And I'm actually excited to tell you as well. So there's the live coming on Wednesday. Be here for that. You can have a couple screens open if you want, have your phone go on your laptop. As we look at the schedule, we'll break it down and I'll tell you live right there as I'm looking at it for the first time with you, my interpretations of what it means. If it's good for the team, bad for the team, how does it shape up for the start of the season? What are the key matchups? What are the key insights that I have on certain opponents and whether it's good to catch them early or late and all of that. So, really, really looking forward to that. If you would like to have a question or comment answered earlier or quicker or first, and a way to support the channel, you can purchase a super chat or a super sticker, and that elevates your comment to the top of the chat. It highlights it. I see it in bright, bold colors and letters, and it elevates to the top of the chat. So I will jump right to your comment or question first. And it's also a great way to support us. But like I said, just hitting that like button or just simply listening or participating is good enough. Thank you so much. Yeah, you guys can see over my shoulder here, this is one of the Giants' 100th season hats. So this is the new swag that the Giants have come out with. They have a 1925 clothing collection. And this is basically the signature hat. The Giants were kind enough to give out some swag boxes to us in the media the other day at rookie minicamp. They also have a June 20th fan event. So it is a night with legends. They're going to have tons of Giant legends. It's going to be at the theater at Madison Square Garden, June 20th, I believe. And season ticket holders can start buying tickets on Wednesday. And then actually season ticket holders can start buying tickets on Tuesday, I should say, May 14th. And then the general public, there will be a limited amount available to the general public on Thursday. But yeah, I got one of the hats here for you guys to check out. Pretty sharp. I like what they're doing there, and it's going to be a fun season. I know I've talked to some of our loyal fans and listeners here on the channel and in the comment section. And one of our followers mentioned something to me that he appreciated that I show respect for the Giants tradition and putting the team in context and compare and contrast to what's happened in the past and the present, what the Giants need to do to get back to their identity, etc. And I do think it's important to present everything in context. And that's actually what I was starting to say earlier. I have a podcast rolling out with Brandon Jacobs. And I talked to Brandon just today, actually, as we record here on May 13th, directly on video. It'll be on the YouTube channel live in the morning on Tuesday, May 14th. And that was a fun 20-minute conversation with Brandon talking about the Dexter Lawrence celebrity softball game that's coming this Saturday in Pomona at Clover Stadium. Sexy Dexy, what is it? The sexydexygame.com, I believe, is what it is. I'll have all the information for you there. LPG, license plate guy, Joe Ruback, does a great job organizing that. And I talked to Brandon not only about that game, because it is going to be Team Lawrence versus Team Jacobs, but also the event, how much they're raising. And then we got into a lot about the modern NFL, about practices under Tom Coughlin, about Saquon Barkley, Malik Neighbors, Daniel Jones, and on and on. It really a fun interview, and I think you guys will like it a lot. All right, let's see. Let's start off with Rick Bowman. Rick, who's a loyal supporter, follower. Rick, I saw you reposting another video and clip of mine on X that I had off of YouTube. I appreciate you spreading the word of what I'm sharing here. That definitely is helping bringing people here. Rick says the pro scouting department under Chris Rossetti has been a bright spot. What distinguished Nick Latesta's work that earned him his promotion to assistant director of pro scouting? I think, time spent, diligence, working. Nick is also somebody who, so the Giants, um, the way that they operate, Rick, they have scouts, like a couple members of the scouting staff that will participate and sometimes rotate in and out of the coach's box upstairs. And so Joe Shane's, in the spirit of collaboration, right? Joe Shane's staff and Brian Dabol's staff, it's not just coaches in the coach's box. Scouts and people in the personnel staff, higher up in the personnel staff, like Nick, they spend time in that box monitoring the process, charting players on both sides of the ball, on both teams, charting opponents, doing pre-scout work in that regard, and being a part of the process on game day while also doing that pre-scout. And Nick is just somebody that they trust very much, who's been involved in that role for them. And in addition to his sharp eye out in the field and scouting around the league, is also somebody who they feel like they've been able to count on game days, trustworthy, well-rounded, and has shown that in these various areas that they've put him in, that he can do the work. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, I can't sit here and specifically tell you like this specific player is somebody that he identified when everybody wasn't pounding the table and he was. I don't have that detail for you this early in the process, but I will try to get to the bottom more of maybe like specific instances like that. A lot of times it's hard to get to something like that because ultimately the general manager is responsible for wins and losses in that regard. So you don't always kind of parse, let's say whose victory was whose, because then that can easily turn into a blame game or sound like a blame game. So nobody really wants to pump their own tires unless they feel like they have to. But Latesta, definitely somebody who's been involved in various parts of that operation, both in scouting and also kind of as a how do I put it, like a conduit and an extra arm of the general manager and of the scouting staff in that regard in the front office. Candyman says we need to find a gem among these undrafted free agents and late round rookies. Been a while since Cruz, maybe. Yeah, Victor Cruz, right. Yeah, Candyman, you're absolutely right. You would like to think, especially when you talk about, let's just be honest. The offensive line right now, Pro Football Focus did a story today as we speak here on May 13th about the best and worst position groups at each spot in the NFL. So in other words, the best quarterback team is the Kansas City Chiefs, and the weakest quarterback room is the Raiders. That was what their judgment was on quarterbacks. Okay. The offensive line group, Pro Football Focus judged that the Detroit Lions offensive line was the strongest coming out of free agency in the draft going into 2024. But they judged the Giants as the weakest, essentially saying they were one of the worst in the league last year, and they didn't do enough to upgrade it so far. And I bring that up now because, well, certainly I think that's noteworthy. I know Pro Football Focus grades are not gospel by any means, but I don't think it's a stretch for somebody to say, you should still be concerned about this unit until they prove otherwise. So I do think that's fair, especially given how bad it got last year. But I bring that up, Candy, as you're talking about the UDFAs, because the Giants didn't draft an offensive lineman in this draft. And Joe Shane and John Mara, both guys who said out loud how much of a priority the offensive line was this season. Certainly they signed guys in free agency led by John Runyon Jr., Jermaine Illuminor, and Aaron Stinney. And even got Austin Schlottman as a backup center, who people have told me is steady. And who's it? Matt Nelson, I think, the tackle, right tackle or swing tackle, possibly from the Detroit Lions. But by and large, they could be upgrades given what they have. But also, listen, Justin Pugh, Ben Bredesen, these are guys who helped the Giants last year. And I know they struggled as a unit, and it was a revolving door at plenty of times, especially at guard. But how much of those guys are upgrades that they acquired versus what they have, we will see. Certainly you expect Runyon to help them on the interior, and Illuminor is versatile. But I look at this undrafted free agent class, Candyman, And it's really hard to expect an undrafted free agent to come in and develop quickly enough to be a primary role player on an NFL team and help them succeed, right? Especially if you get thrust into a significant role. But it did strike me as significant and meaningful on the rookie minicamp field. Like at one point when they lined up their offensive line, Marcellus Johnson, their tackle that they signed out of Missouri, was lined up at left tackle. And Jake Kubas, he's the guard from North Dakota State, another UDFA signing, was lined up at left guard. So those are two positions where, yes, they need reserves, backups, and help, especially if Thomas goes down at the left tackle spot. We talked to Brian Baldinger and several other line experts and analysts and people around the league and executives who noted that the Giants coming into the draft needed a swing tackle and also needed some developmental prospects in the building. And so, Marcellus Johnson, Jake Kubas, sitting them put in roles that you hope that they can grow into and learn and help the Giants in a developmental capacity, both in, trying to chip in maybe late this season, but also more looking for the long term. Like, you got to get guys in the pipeline. And especially for Carmen Brasillo, the new offensive line coach, James Ferentz, the new assistant O-line coach. You got Chris Snee in here now. By the way, Brandon Jacobs dropped a nice nugget on Chris Snee in our interview in the podcast that's dropping tomorrow, so check that out. But you got to let them get their hands on some young guys, young offensive linemen, to mold them and craft them and do what they, especially what Brasillo did with the Raiders, where he was able to take a line that people didn't have a very high opinion of and form a pretty good one. So let's see. Thanks for that question, Candy. You got me going there. What trade expectations would you take to trade Slayton? Joel says, I would move on from him for a third-round pick. I think a third-round pick, Joel, is extremely optimistic. Not that Slayton's a good player, but especially if you're the Giants right now and you're in a position where, like, let's say they decide to trade him or they're pushed to trade him and everybody knows they're trying to trade him if it ever got to that point, the leverage that they would have. I struggle to envision them getting a third. Like, a third's a pretty significant asset. And Slayton, you have to imagine wherever he would be going, Joel, he would be going to a team that would probably be slotting him as their third wide receiver, right? So in that case, they're not looking to spend a third round pick on that, right? You're probably more likely talking about a fifth, I would think. And, I think a fourth would be hopeful and a fifth would be more realistic is my guess. But if you're the Giants, you're not doing it for nothing either. And here's the thing about the Slayton trade, and the talk and the rumors and that kind of thing, as I take a sip here. More than a sip, thirsty tonight. So when I was talking about the Darius Slayton trade possibility right when he did not come to the start of spring workouts, for me, I'm not necessarily saying the Giants are definitely going to trade Darius Slayton. In fact, when you look at their receiving core, are you really trading one of your only veteran, experienced, steady hands, and, a guy who really could be considered a leader, in my opinion, off of that roster and that room? Do you have a luxury to do that? I don't really think the Giants have that luxury necessarily. So that's one thing. But the reason, to me, a trade becomes a possibility is because when Slayton didn't show up, to me, yes, it's possible that the Giants would give him a little financial bump. But I think based on the history of his negotiations with the Giants and how they, kind of squeezed him into that, how they squeezed him into that pay cut. And that was an embarrassing time for Darius Slayton when they first arrived. To me, I would struggle to think that Darius really expects them to give him a significant amount of money, especially the kind of money that he's looking for. So when I see that Darius Slayton is not showing up for Giants workouts in the spring, I view that more as he's saying, I expect and feel like I deserve and I want a raise. But if I don't get one, then if a trade happens, all the better, because now I'm going to a better offense, a team that has shown that they want me. And I'm going to hit the market next year, being able to probably put a better foot forward as far as my opportunities in the pass game than I have in New York. I do think the Giants have to play this one delicately, though, because, I almost think the ship has sailed on trying to convince the locker room that this isn't a business. In other words, Saquon Barkley, what he went through last year, James Bradbury, what happened right when Joe Shane and Brian Dabol got here with him, Darius Slayton in that first year as well, Sterling Shepard at times, and other guys on and on, Nick Gates, et cetera. Like, this has been a pretty, cutthroat operation. And listen, this is a business. Teams have to get better. If you feel like a guy's not helping you and you have to move on, you can't begrudge a front office and a team, especially that's been losing as much as the Giants have, for trying to cut bait from players they feel like aren't helping them and moving on. But there's a way to do it. And certainly in some of these situations, the players have been grinded. They felt like they've either been treated the wrong way or they didn't like how something was handled. And so I definitely think the Giants have to be careful here, because you have yet another guy in the locker room that people look up to now, clearly demonstrating that, if you guys are going to look out for yourselves, and I see that loyalty is not necessarily something that's going to trump everything when it comes to a situation like Saquon Barkley's, then I'm going to stand my ground too. So I do think the Giants have to be careful about how they handle that. Jacob says, smash that like and sub button for Pat on your way in. Jacob, thank you as always for reminding people of that. You're a loyal one. Jacob says, Pat, do you think Kafka and Tierney relationship is strained since Tierney took some of his responsibilities? So Jacob's referring to Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, and Shea Tierney, the Giants quarterback coach. Jacob, I have no direct knowledge of any animosity between Mike and Shea. What I would say is that the dynamic is simply as such that Shea Tierney came here with Brian Dabol, and Mike Kafka was hired by Brian Dabol and Joe Shane, but was joined with Brian Dabol at that time in New York, as compared to Shea Tierney, who came with Brian, here from Buffalo. And Tierney is a Dabol guy, right? And, in coaching, that's how it goes, right? You form friendships, you become people that you can trust each other. And certainly in a business as let's see, high stakes, right? And things can turn on a dime when you're gunning for a leadership position, and these guys are trying to become head coaches and general managers their whole lives, and they finally get there. You need people around you that you can trust. And so every head coach, every staff, right, that happens, right? There's certain coaches that that head coach brings with them and that keeps them close. And that's somebody that, if everything else falls around them, they know that they can trust that person. So Shea Tierney is that person for Brian Dabol, right? And so, that is part of how that ends up happening when Brian Dabol starts taking play calling, offensive meetings away from Mike Kafka, play calling away from him multiple times, and eventually ends up giving it to Shea Tierney for the second half in Dallas. None of my reporting turned up anything direct that occurred or happened between Mike and Shea. It was simply the head coach making that decision and taking play calling away from the offensive coordinator that he had been treating, in a lot of people's minds unfairly and in a hostile way, consistently, and giving it to his buddy and to his guy, right? So that was viewed that way by a lot of people. I can't say Mike Kafka didn't view it that way, right? But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, any conversation happened where they were, face to face, or, that it was confrontational or anything like that. That's nothing that I have reported. But Jacob, I'm glad you brought up Mike Kafka and Shea Tierney, because this is one observation I wanted to share with you guys from rookie minicamp. And I know it's only rookie minicamp and they're just getting these guys going. But to me, we're entering a season where Brian Dabol is expected as the head coach to take over offensive play calling, for good for this season. After taking it away from Kafka, giving it back, taking it away, giving it back last year, giving it to Shea in the Dallas game, et cetera. He's expected to take play calling for this 2024 season. I mean, his butt essentially is on the line. I wouldn't blame any coach for trying to do what they feel like they are best at. in a season where they have to put their best foot forward or else. And that being said, I thought it was interesting in the context of Dabol being expected to take over play calling, that when the rookie quarterbacks on the field were running 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 or 11 on air, I should say, type plays, when they were repping plays on the field in front of us at practice at rookie minicamp, Brian Dabol was the one standing directly behind the huddle, stepping in to talk to the quarterbacks briefly, giving them the play calls and the calls into them. Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, was there around the offense, but standing back, significantly back from the huddle, not engaging from what I could tell. And Dabol was the one speaking with the quarterbacks as they would then hand the play to the rest of the guys in the huddle and go. And so, Dabol's always been involved with the offense. It's not new that he's involved with them, but it stood out to me how much he was doing and talking into that huddle versus Mike. So just reinforced what I feel like we already know. D Kit says Pat is looking refreshed. Thank you, D Kit. Appreciate you. Just got a little pickup basketball run in before the chat. So trying to stay active, trying to look good in these suits come the fall for our arrival videos, Nice to get back on the court, though. Miz says, hey, Pat, it's Miz. Enjoy you. Hey, Miz, thank you, man. You always bring it here as well. Thanks for being such a loyal participant. Let's see. He says, yeah, he's pointing out that they signed Campbell, the defensive lineman. Let's see. I think you're talking about Chapman, right? Chapman, the defensive tackle, 6 foot, 278, 23 years old, out of SMU, Shreveport, Louisiana, tryout. Let's see. D-Kit says, I saw him play live. Oh, what did you think of him, D-Kit? D-Kit says, did you get to see the quarterback from Wabash? Yes. So the three quarterbacks on the field were Liam Thompson from Wabash, Ben Bryant from Northwestern, and Blake Stenstrom from Princeton. So Stenstrom was 6'4" out there, the biggest guy. I would say all of the quarterbacks had throws they wanted back. Nobody wowed me like crazy. The Princeton kid did cut more of the profile that I think the Giants typically prefer at the quarterback position as far as size. But Liam was ripping them in there. But definitely, not to get on any of those guys, but D-Kid, it just really stood out to me. And I wrote this for the New York Daily News. It was just so different watching rookie minicamp without like a guy like Drake May or a highly picked rookie quarterback out there. Malik Neighbors obviously was the star attraction for the weekend, but it would have felt so different for them having a star QB out there or a future franchise QB out there. It's just harder to project anything into the future. Instead of you're looking at these guys about how can they help them now. Miz says Chapman will be a steal. He's a beast. Okay. G-Men says, what's going on, Pat? We talk about depth on this team all the time. Are the Giants done adding to the roster? Some good names are still available. No, I would not say they're done, G-Men, but you can tell by how they've been adding players recently how it's going to happen, right? They're going to have to do it affordably. Veteran salary benefit deals, like affordable contracts. They're taking a lot of chances, and well, not even chances, really. They're not high risks as far as salaries, but they're using a lot of their remaining minimal capital on veterans who maybe some other teams have cast aside, and the Giants are saying we can still squeeze some football out of this guy, right? The Jalen Mills, the Allen Robinsons, the guys like that. It is interesting to me how expensively they spent on Brian Burns, and then you see how many other additions they need to make to the roster, and now it's happening in a very kind of, frugal way. But then again, you're a team that is lacking A-listers, so you're trying to find A-listers. And this is why I always say this on this chat. I know people probably get tired of hearing it, but even going into the draft, the Giants were just in such a difficult, like between a rock and a hard place as far as it's like It's like always trying to plug the dam with a bunch of holes in it, wherever you put your finger in this one to stop the water coming out, and then it shoots out of here. G-Men, I think it's very obvious two things. The Giants are keeping their eyes open for anything and anyone right now to add to their team to make them better, but they also have to do it cheaply. That's what we've seen so far. And no one has jumped out specifically that they are going after. Chris Peace, what's going on? Good to see you. Thanks for being back. Bill says, I got to get one of those hats. Chris says, might have to order one too. D-Kit wants me to raffle the hat off. Oh man, that's not a bad idea, D-Kit. Maybe we'll do that. Joey B says, what's up, everyone? Joey B, good to have you here, man. The gang is here. That's right, Bill. Joey B says he will be at the Sexy Dexy game. All right. H5000 says, if this O-line is rated in the bottom 10 and we have a losing season, I want Shane, Dabol, and Brasillo gone. Dallas, New England, and Baltimore have had an average good offensive line over the past 10 to 15 years. Yeah, H5000, I agree with that. Nobody needs this offensive line to be incredible, right? You don't need it to be flawless. It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to be running the ball for 6 yards a carry and allowing 1 sack a game. Right? That's not what it's going to be. Like that's not realistic. And here's the thing that I don't like that Joe Schoen continues to refer to. He continues to refer to something, the injuries. Look at we've never seen that many injuries in the offensive line. First of all, injuries happen in football. You have to be prepared in the depth sense. And in 2023, you had a 3-man guard rotation between Glowinski, Bredesen, and Josh Azudu, where you were showing so little faith in any of the two, and you were so, I guess, not enamored with what you were seeing, that they were trying to get Josh Azudu to win the job. He couldn't do it. But they were rotating those guys in every single snap during practices. And then their backup tackle solution was Matt Peart and Josh Azudu. So don't give me this guys got hurt thing, right? Not to mention that the guys who ended up playing poorly, right, were your draft picks, the guys who hurt you the most. Marcus McKeithen, Josh Azudu, Evan Neal, obviously, right? And even John Michael Schmidt's a guy who you can't expect a rookie to put everybody on his back, right? But even he said himself, like, he needs to play better. He has to have a better year. I guess my point is, H5000, I agree with you, is that you look around the NFL. This is why I was harping on the injuries just there with Shane's comments. You look around the NFL, the teams that are winning, it's not like they're all healthy up front on their offensive line. They either it's a combination of having the quarterback and skill players and scheme to compensate or to overcome it. And also, it's just about figuring out a way to do what your players do well, to avoid what they don't do well as far as play calling. How do you protect people, right? How do you protect your offensive linemen? How do you protect weaknesses on the field? Like, that all goes into coaching, game planning, goes into against what the matchups are in that game. Who are you playing against, right? Like, this is why certain coaching staffs succeed and why some fail, and why certain personnel groups and front offices succeed and some fail. Like, these are not easy things to figure out, but there are other teams figuring it out. I do think this, guys. I do think Chris Snee is going to help the Giants out of their offensive line rut in as far as personnel scouting. Like, I really, really do. I know just because he was a great player doesn't necessarily mean he'll be a great scout or he'll fix that for the Giants, but he's just a really respected, scouting eye person, professional. Like, I just find it very hard to believe that he's not going to help them in that regard. And I do think he will. Obviously, though, how quickly can that happen, right? That's a big question. Bill says, bring me back something pretty from the softball game. I'm 3,000 miles away. Joey B says, this line is going to stink. Let's see. They got Runyon as the key piece, and I didn't even know he played until we got him. One concern with Runyon, Joey, is that the Packers were starting to kind of platoon him and phase him out a little bit as a starter last year, late in the season and in the playoffs. kind of splitting time with one of their draft picks. Now, he is still a respected player and professional. I know Brian Baldinger, when I was talking to him, he just gave some great insight about how hard of a worker he is, how solid he is, not just as a person, but like as a player that you can count on. He'll be a leader in the offensive line room, right? It's not always the easiest thing for like an offensive guard to lead a team, right? That's not a typical thing. You're playing on the interior of the O line. You're kind of doing a lot of the grunt work, right? You're not the forward facing, flashy skill position player and star scoring touchdowns, but he is supposed to bring that type of element. And so that steadiness, durability, those things. But certainly I agree with you. It wasn't a top of the market spend at guard, was a player that the Packers were starting to move away from as far as counting on him like they had in the past. So he's going to have to prove it like everybody else. And really, Joey, it's going to come down to a combination of all those things. Guys that they brought in playing well in certain roles, Brasillo and Dabol and the team and the coaching staff figuring out which roles are best for those guys. And also, in my opinion, you got to get your starting five playing early together and keep them together, because it feels like the season's a long way away here in May, but we have the schedule coming out, the full schedule coming out in 2 days from when we sit here and talk right now. And once that schedule comes out, you guys all know it starts to get real as far as what you're planning for, as far as who are we facing in week 1 and 2? Are we going to have to be blocking? Who's coming off the edge after Daniel Jones or Drew Lock or whoever's at quarterback? Who's going to be blocking them at right tackle, right? Who's the right guard playing next to the right tackle? Is there a competition at right tackle? How late are we going to figure out who that is? Like, you need to build regular snaps and reps and consistency with those guys up front. So the sooner that the Giants can get to that, the better. Let's see. Miz is bringing me some Rangers updates. Appreciate you, Miz. 2-1 Carolina, he says. Thank you. Oh, that was a while ago, too, so you may have something more for me down the road. Joey B says, what's the buzz on this Germany game, and what are you hearing, Pat? Joey, everyone's lips are tight. No one's saying anything. Bottom line is, my opinion is I do think there's a good chance that they're going. Here, the latest that I knew, and this was from the owners' meetings, but this was the direct from John Mara saying that, it's a possibility that the Giants go this year. There was talk that the NFL was planning on sending the Giants over, but waiting a year so that they would be the home team and not the road team. And I don't know what exactly the reason is for that. It may be to make sure that the Giants aren't necessarily getting any, preferential treatment, let's say, and playing a road game there. And so they don't end up losing a home game. And, you have to alternate between being home and road and trying to be fair to everybody. Maybe that's something I'm not exactly sure why. That I definitely think that would factor in probably to those types of decisions with the league. But as I sit here with you guys right now, my hunch is that I think they could be going to Germany for this season. But, the official word from the Giants co-owner, John Mara himself, going back to late March at the owners' meetings, was he just said, I'm not sure, we might be this year, but, there's talk that they want us to be the home team. So we will see. And that was from John Mara himself. Let's see. D Kit checks in with a $5 super chat. I appreciate you, D Kit. He says, so Pat, do you get the feeling that the Giants really believe that Daniel Jones will be ready for the start of the season and play? D Kit, I do not get a strong feeling about that from them. Asking Brian Dabol about Daniel Jones at rookie mini camp, and his answer essentially was, well, he's going through phase 2. We'll see how phase 3 goes. And it was a direct question about, do you expect him to participate in anything live with the team, or is he not going to be on the field till training camp? And you didn't even get a straight answer from that. I do think it's encouraging. You see those photos of Daniel on the field throwing, looking like he's driving into those throws. That's good to see, obviously. But the Giants have not spoken in a confident way about Daniel's health. It always feels like it's couched. I did think it was interesting that Nathan Rourke did not participate in the rookie minicamp because he certainly would be eligible for that. As a guy who hasn't played a snap in the NFL yet, there were guys who were on the Giants roster practice squad last year, like Dennis Houston and Caleb Hayes at corner and receiver and corner respectively, who were on the field. So I do think that was reflective of the fact that he's a guy who is, really here to compete, like play some real football, develop as a quarterback. Like at this juncture, Nathan Rourke becomes the young quarterback the Giants have added, right? He becomes the young developmental prospect that we were talking about essentially. And so from talking to people about him, I don't get the sense that there's confidence that he's like some solution to the Giants' issues at quarterback. I don't, as far as in the short term, but he's a guy that they can get in the building and see what they can do with somebody who has somewhat of a gunslinger mentality. Definitely, I think would be a threat to Tommy DeVito. And I would expect if he's capable that he would be able to beat him out. So if he can't beat out Tommy DeVito, he shouldn't be on the team anyway. Joey B says, why hasn't Ronnie Barnes been replaced yet? So he's asking about the Giants head athletic trainer. Ronnie Barnes, a very respected, tenured person in the Giants organization. The Giants turned over an enormous amount of their franchise coming out of, let's see. Well, there was McAdoo Reese, then there was Shermer Gettleman, then Judge Gettleman, right? And throughout all of that, essentially in a 6-year period, the Giants made dramatic changes to tons of areas in their building, all the way to the, security department, and on and on. And one of the only areas they did not make a significant change in is this area. The athletic training room, the athletic training staff, as far as like we talk about leadership and dramatically changing the way it operates. It was essentially the athletic training staff and public relations department, two areas that were pretty much insulated and remained consistent from that. I do think that, Ronnie Barnes is somebody who he's been around. He's been here for a long time. He's not going to be their head athletic trainer forever, but he will be for as long as he wants to be. And he is extremely close with the Mara family. They view him as an extension of their family. He was very close with Wellington Mara, the late Wellington Mara, John's father. And so he is tied into lots of major conversations and decisions in the organization more than you would understand or realize, and is somebody who is considered essentially as much of the fabric of the building and the franchise and the organization as anybody else in the building, including those whose last names are Mara and Tisch themselves. I do personally believe, and have believed for several years covering the Giants, that every department of every team should be under the same amount of scrutiny, especially when it comes to, let's say, injuries are a regular occurrence, an issue for the Giants, right? If guys come back on the field too soon, if guys are getting hurt in certain situations, soft tissue injuries are popping up frequently, whatever the case may be. Like you see in this instance, for example, after this season, Craig Fitzgerald leaves. A lot is made of, replacing him with Aaron Wellman. And I believe it was Joe Shane who made a comment when he was asked about the amount of injuries that the Giants have incurred and have sustained. I believe it was him who mentioned out of nowhere voluntarily Fitzgerald's departure and a turnover in the strength and conditioning program. The implication seemingly being a connection between the strength and conditioning program and the way the guys have either failed to stay healthy or gotten hurt, whatever the case may be. But I always view comments like that as skirting the issue and playing the blame game and creating scapegoats where it's not necessary. But also, like, if you're going to place blame and you're going to do an autopsy, then do a full autopsy. Don't do a partial one. That's what I would say. Okay, let's see. But also, listen, there's office politics, right? In NFL franchises, just like in everywhere else. And there's certain people in organizations that are untouchable. And that's just the bottom line. And also I would say, there are stories, there are many people have a great affinity for Ronnie Barnes, and he has made a huge difference in a lot of people's lives, huge positive difference in a lot of people's lives as well. And the Giants have a great affinity for him. Bill Hartnett with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate you. He says, Nathan Rourke could threaten Tommy DeVito. No, keep my Tommy safe, Pat. You know how I feel about him. And yes, it makes no sense. No, listen, I mean, the Giants are in an interesting place with Tommy because, the fan base is obviously loves, what he did for the team last year. It was a great story, especially in a season where you didn't have much to hang your hat on at all. I mean, I found it fascinating. I was on vacation a month ago or so, and I met somebody, and, we started talking. It was a friendly conversation, and they, eventually they asked what I did, and I told them I covered the Giants. And the first thing the guy said, he looks at me, he goes, Tommy Cutlets, first thing out of his mouth. And, to me, it was so funny because when that was all going on last year, like I was so diligently working on figuring out what was wrong with the organization, with the team, with the coaching staff at that moment. I knew that the DeVito story was in the end going to end up being fleeting and a footnote in a much bigger story about what the Giants are really doing and what they are. And so it was hard for me to see it for as big as what it was made out to be, because there was so much happening behind the scenes that it was, I guess, temporarily concealing. And obviously, as you guys now know, that stretch ends up winning them out of a future franchise quarterback. But certainly was happy for Tommy, happy for everything that he's built and what it'll do for his life, obviously, of course. And he was ready for his moment. So good for him. I think he caught the right part of the schedule. The Giants supported him well and those types of things. But let's be honest about, every player's strengths and shortcomings. DeVito at one point, wasn't necessarily going to make the Giants team going into training camp, last year in 2023, as far as the way the roster was looking and how things were going to shake out early in camp and that kind of thing. And so it is a success story for him personally, but that doesn't mean you don't bring in competition. But then again, if this season is going off the rails for the Giants, do Giants fans want a Tommy DeVito around, right? Do you want some kind of can you get any juice from that? Or is, like from my perspective, you don't keep somebody around like that just for that reason. Like, players aren't mascots. They got to help you win games. All right, D Kid says, did you see enough of the rookie UDFAs to come away with a favorite from this weekend? Someone off the beaten path. So let's see. Of the UDFAs I saw, I'll give you one. The Giants obviously didn't sign this guy. It wasn't one of the UDFAs, but Keontae Lusk, he was a corner from Coastal Carolina, originally from Texas. He can run, man. I saw him on kick coverage at one point, and they were using him on special teams, taking a look at different guys in coverage, and he was flying. They didn't end up signing him, but that stood out to me. It was very fast. Let's see. The UDFAs, I mentioned earlier that the two offensive linemen lining up at left tackle and left guard stood out to me as far as what they could see those guys becoming. Let's see. Did anybody else stand out? Ayir Asante, the wide receiver from Wyoming and from Franklin Township, New Jersey originally. I liked how he moved. He made a couple nice plays. He caught my eye running routes. So as far as the UDFAs, I would probably say Asante. He's the person I marked and wrote some notes next to. So that's what I would come away with. Did anyone see that SportsCenter piece on Mother's Day about our new tight end? His mom was a domestic abuse survivor, and I like this kid even more now after watching He's Got Marbles. Interesting. I did not see that piece, Joey, but he did talk a little bit about how much he appreciates his mom the other day. I will go watch that. So you're talking about Theo Johnson. And really, this kind of answers D Kit's question there too, because D Kit was asking about the rookie UDFAs. But Theo Johnson was the rookie that I came away the most from rookie minicamp thinking about his role on the team now, because we know he's big. We know he's tall. I think he's 6'6", right? I'm looking down at the roster. Yeah, 6'6", 259. But he's got an edge and an attitude and some anger to the way that he blocks and plays. And I know some people like Daniel Bellinger. I know some Giants fans like what Bellinger has brought. I do think that even though he has provided some value in the pass game at times, I think it's obvious that he struggles as a blocker and he commits penalties, right? Like if you look back at last season, I can think of at least like 2 or 3 instances where he committed a holding penalty or a penalty. Yeah, usually it would be holding, but penalties that ended up costing the Giants when they had made a positive play, kind of brought the ball back. And I like Daniel as a person, as a guy. And I know he has provided some value, like I said, in other situations, but I think I can see Theo Johnson as a blocker. And of course he's a rookie. So this is the NFL now. He's going to have to learn. And, Bellinger cuts an impressive physical frame as well. Johnson looks to me though like a more athletic, a little bit of a faster step version of a Bellinger. And I think that the way the Giants are assembling their team right now, and they have, Jack Stoll, Chris Manhertz, and now Theo Johnson being added to the tight end room. I can see those 3 guys shaping up as what Brian Dabol is looking for from this tight end group, which is help the O-line, help the tackles, help that pass protection, help getting the running game going. And if your receiving core has speed and explosiveness, as it looks like it could now with Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, if he's sticking around, Allen Robinson down in the building. If you have guys who are getting that separation, but you just need to buy a little time for Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, I like what I see from a Theo Johnson as far as being a road grading blocker. If he's in line in the run game, being able to pull and block and trap, and also, a threat in the passing game when he's on the field, especially in the red zone. So I know, still a developmental player. I don't know necessarily. It's a lot to ask of any of these rookies, really anybody past the second round. Asking the rookie to step in and provide a significant amount of game-changing plays is an unfair ask, and it's rare. Even second-round picks and first-round picks take acclimation periods a lot. In the way the Giants are constructed, though, you could be looking at their top 3 or 4 picks at least having to play prominent roles. Neighbors and Tyler Nubin, the safety, the second-round safety, obviously they both have to play significant starting roles, it looks like. Even Drew Phillips could end up having to be a starting slot corner, which is a dangerous proposition for any rookie. But physical, has a good attitude, really some really good kids. You talk about young men, Nubin, Phillips, Theo, Tyrone Tracy Jr. was a great person to listen to and talk to. Darius Muasau from Hawaii and UCLA. So they were all great guys, to listen to. And Neighbors carried himself well as well in his first press conference after a practice, let's say. Joey B says, when can we expect a Darren Waller announcement? Everybody's waiting. I can't imagine. I don't know why we just haven't gotten it officially over with. Doesn't seem like something that's going to happen, right? Him playing football. I guess obviously nowadays there's plenty of veterans who try to step away from parts of the off season and then end up coming back feeling refreshed and feeling like you're going to get their best football out of them because they had whatever break they needed, whether it's physical or mental. But I just don't see him playing football for the Giants again. But of course, not official, and we don't know. Any news on Adoree coming back? No. Is Flock going to be corner CB2? Joey, it sounds like he has the inside track. I was very interested that Brian Dabol unveiled that at the owners' meetings. If you guys remember watching the video of that interview and reading our stories, Brian Dabol was asked a lot of questions about different free agent signings, how he envisioned, certain players fitting in on offense and defense, and he wouldn't say anything. He kept referring to how early it was in the process, but you're spending tens of millions of dollars on guys. I think you have a pretty good idea of where you might play them, right? And so it was interesting to hear Dabol now come out at rookie minicamp and be asked about the opposite corner spot opposite Deonte Banks. And he says, look forward to all these other practices, but I have a lot of confidence in Flott. So if you're Nick McLeod, obviously that's not what you want to hear, but, same amount of incentive to go out, compete, try to win that job. To me, it reflects, again, the lack of depth the Giants have right now, obviously, on that roster. I think the best version of their secondary probably has Deonte Banks on the outside, Cordell Flott as their slot receiver or slot corner, and a corner that is not on the roster yet as CB2, or Nick McLeod stepping up and taking that. I just feel like having a veteran presence there is necessary. And is the way that they could be the most steady. And also, you don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, right? You don't want to take Flott, put him on the outside when he would be your best slot corner. And in the modern NFL, a lot of the better receivers and guys who are doing the most damage, they're either running routes out of there exclusively, or they're moving inside, outside, and they're going to match up against your guy there. So I do think it's interesting. Obviously, though, if you have Cordell Flott as a corner CB2 opposite Deonte Banks, and you have Banks and Flott both playing at high levels at those positions and locking it down, now it's a little bit of a different conversation. But in the modern NFL, like we saw when Darnay Holmes was a rookie, and when he was a young player, rookie, second year, he was thrust into some situations where the Giants had, some reliability around him. But if he was guarding a receiver and it was a mismatch in coverage, then they might just run the guy across the field, create some separation, catch and run. And I'm not picking on Darnay. I'm just using that as an example. Like, it's been plenty of other players for the Giants over the years in different situations. But it's just an example of, if you have one player on the field, even if it's slot corner, that's a mismatch. In the modern NFL, tight ends can be the best weapons on teams. Travis Kelce, with the Chiefs. Slot receivers can be the number one option in an offense, like CeeDee Lamb for the Dallas Cowboys. You have versatility also that you didn't have years ago, guys switching different positions and being able to play inside and outside. And so the Giants, to me, Cordell Flott win the outside job, that would be great, especially if he's playing that well where he's winning it. Certainly you need a CB2. But if he's your best slot and you can go find a veteran corner to help you on the outside, would love to see it. But again, we talked earlier about the Giants look like they're in the bargain bin. They're trying to make affordable, smart signings wherever they can to kind of plug these depth spots. And, players like Stephon Gilmore and players who have a lot left or are looking to win, unfortunately, are not coming here to New York, to the Giants. I mean, as far as like guys who are planning to contend for a championship, if they have an option to sign with a contender, they're not signing here when it's not like, the way that you sign with a team that's not a contender, when you have offers from contenders, is the worst team blows you out of the water with money. And with, sometimes it's with a starting role, obviously, so that can help too, right? But without the money behind it, it is usually hard to attract those players. Let's see. J-Jan says, you demand, Pat. Evan Neal is the biggest question for me. Evan Neal is a huge question, J-Jan. And I believe that I think that the way Evan goes is going to have a large say in the way the O-line goes. And I don't mean that he plays well and they're good, he doesn't and they're bad. Like, it's not just on him. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying, though, that I just like their depth chart way more if he provides competent football and stays healthy versus not, and really it comes down to, if he's not the starter, is he really your swing tackle, right? Because there's skepticism that he could really be the swing tackle if that's what you need him to be, if Illuminor is starting there. So that's a concern if Evan Neal doesn't win the job. Now, part of the other question, though, is that Jermaine Illuminor is getting paid like free agent starter money. Like, his contract says that the Giants intend for him to be on the field. Like, that's what Jermaine Illuminor's contract says, that they believe he will be on the field. So it's interesting. Like, when I project what the line's going to look like, Jan, I consistently say, Andrew Thomas left tackle, Aaron Stinney left guard, John Michael Schmidt center, John Runyon Jr. right guard, and then Evan Neal / Jermaine Illuminor as the right tackle, depending on who wins that. But to me, I know the plan is to give Evan Neal a look and a way to put his best foot forward and kind of protect and win that job. But I do think, this is just me talking, that no one has said this to me. But I do think, based on reading the tea leaves, looking at Illuminor's contract, and also, frankly, I personally, I've talked to enough people who know offensive line now. The offensive line, like, rotating guys between positions, like from left guard to right tackle and back, like, that's not optimal. It's not what you want to do. Versatility is good, but you want to settle guys in. You want to settle guys in to places they're comfortable, and also you want to solidify the union as a 5. And so you're right. How Evan Neal plays, how reliable he can be as a professional and just as a player on the field, will go a long way. Hopefully he's healthy. I will say this, Jan. I did ask Brian Dabol if Evan Neal has been in the building during the spring program, because I know that, listen, all of these guys work out with private trainers, or they work out with groups of people with, well-known trainers, that some of them they've worked with since they were drafted. And so during the off season, sometimes there's days where guys are away, then they come back, and when it's optional, that kind of stuff. But you would like to see guys, especially when their neck is on the line and maybe their future with the team is on the line, and when the team's back is against the wall, like, you need to see them step up. And Evan Neal, according to Brian Dabol, Evan Neal has been in the building during their offseason program early. You would expect that would happen. You would hope that would happen, but we haven't seen the team on the field yet. So it's really hard to get a gauge on exactly what that's going to look like. And so, good sign that Evan's in the building and working with the team. D Kit says, Pat, do you detect any hangover from the 2023 dysfunction? More to the point, less hubris, and more of a humble outlook. D Kit, thanks again for another super sticker. Thank you so much. Let's see. So, D Kit, I would say less hubris. That's a good question. I think Joe Shane's pre-draft presser, when he talked about we're not 1 or 2 players away, I thought that was a reflection of them kind of rearing back the reins and saying, we know who we are and what we're not. I think I do think that could come from a place of self-preservation as much as it's realism. So in the NFL, I'm not just Joe, but just, in the NFL, especially like when your seat starts getting a little warm, you start trying to make sure people understand the full context of the situation you inherited, how it, Rome wasn't built in a day, all those types of things. We've talked about this on this podcast about how, listen, that's true, but also it's time for Joe Shane to stop referencing the team in 2021. Like, it's 2024, it's year 3, let's go, right? So, I think the humility of what they are and what they need to become and what they're not, like even, you asked about Ronnie Barnes earlier, Joey, and Joe didn't mention Ronnie, but he did point out that under the Shane Dabol regime, that the injuries have been a problem and it's been too much and it's been an issue and they have to get it fixed. And so I thought that those were refreshing comments, like self-aware comments from Joe Shane. And so I do, there was humility in that, I think. Um, so that's good. As far as the hangover from the dysfunction, this is D-Kit. I think that's a really good question because here's what I would say. No overt, I do think there's an intense paranoia about how they operate with what we are allowed to see. And, I think Dabol's press conferences are very vanilla. And like I even, I asked a question about how did Malik Neighbors handle the gambling situation, because we talked to Brian Dabol before the first practice. And then after that practice, Neighbors spoke and was asked about the gambling thing. And he said that he had shut it down, with Jaden Daniels. And so the day after, I asked Brian Dabol, how did he think Neighbors had handled that? And, what did Dabol say to him and that type of thing? Because I wanted to get the coach's response to how his first round pick had managed a situation that really, it's not a headline you want, right? You don't want the first day that he's on your field. The headline is less about his nice catch over the middle, and it's more about, doing something that could have gotten him suspended, right? And Dabol immediately pushed back on the question. What do you mean? I thought the gambling thing was yesterday, right? And it's kind of like, well, no, we didn't get a chance to talk to you, right? But there's a little bit, there's always going to be a little bit of that pushback. I think under Joe Shane and Brian Dabol, this is just being totally honest, like from a reporter standpoint, I think their public relations strategy, Shane's public relations strategy is an aggressive one, like a kind of attack first, right? Like don't wait to find out what's going to be said about you. Try to set the narrative before the narrative is set about you. So there's a little bit of that. And D-Kit, to round out my answer about this, I think that what I would say about any hangover from 2023, nothing overt happening on the field or anything. A lot of the people who didn't want to be here are not here anymore. Mike Kafka was, really the lone major name who was trying to leave and then ended up staying and got the promotion, but was blocked from going to Seattle, right? So that could have happened as well. But I would say the hangover could come more in, and I alluded to this on the in my answer about the offensive line. But I think it could come from just how difficult it really might be here for so many new members of this coaching staff to roll in, hit the ground running with such a new with such a new roster and form it all into something that they can get up and go with and be not only effective, but competitive, competent, and a good football team. I think the hangover more than likely is going to come with how difficult it's going to be for them to have this gel together instantly, because that's hard. That's hard for teams to do. And that's hard for any coaching staff to do. And so they're going to be dealing with that while also Dabol is going to be managing how he manages himself, on the sideline. And that, remember, was really the big deal. Now we saw it in some practices, but also in games, obviously, was when it really reared its head with how Dabol was conducting himself. Carolina Hurricanes win Game 5. Oh, man. Okay. So the Rangers failed to snuff out the Canes, and now the Canes are alive. Don't like seeing that. Was really excited for the Rangers to dispatch 2 opponents early. But, of course, it's never easy, man. Stanley Cup's not easy. All right. I know there's a lot of you in the queue, so I'm trying to get through it here. Being a little long-winded here. Sorry about that. But I do feel like we're having a good chat tonight, and I thank you all for being here as always. Aside from just individual play from the offensive line, the biggest disappointment was a significant failure by the O-line to pick up twists and stunts and the numerous missed assignments, D-Kit said. Yeah, DK, and I think that was a combination of a lot of things. Guys on the field who weren't ready to be on the field, well, I think was a huge one. Like last year, that to me was a really big one. Yes, they had injuries, but the plan for how to assemble their depth last season, including just personnel selections like Azudu and McKeithen, the plan was poor. It was not a good plan. And that falls on Joe Shane. And, that's why Justin Pugh was necessary. That's why, as much as, Giants fans right now, you watch some certain plays or games where maybe you were frustrated by the interior of Bredesen and Pugh. Ben Bredesen essentially saved them as far as being the only competent player at the guard position in many cases, a guy who could rotate in and play center. Now, center isn't his ideal position, but Ben Bredesen did so much work for the Giants that went underappreciated because they had no plan. Their plan was hope that their draft picks and young guys would develop, and it fell flat on their face. Sean Lee says, what's up, Pat? Do you believe the running back group could be in this order? Singletary, Tracy, Miller, leaving Gray on the outside, or the Giants go with 4 running backs on the 53-man roster? Sean, I personally think a guy like Eric Gray, even like I mentioned earlier, Daniel Bellinger, like spots should not be given. Like they need to be earned. Eric Gray needs to prove that he is much more than what he was last year. And I know a lot of his shortcomings came in the return game, and they put him in a position that he didn't deserve to be in, wasn't qualified for. But I totally agree. That could be possible. I mean, I think Tracy's a guy who, like Johnson, could at tight end. Tracy's a running back who can help them in a lot of ways, but also I think is developmental too. He's definitely a pass-catching back who has some speed and explosiveness. I think Tracy's going to make his mark most on kickoffs. I thought it was interesting. They were actually practicing the coverage element of that too, where, they have to stand there 5 yards apart, I think it is, and wait for the ball to land. And then once it's caught, then everybody goes. I thought that was interesting. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned Miller. Dante Miller, the running back from South Carolina. He has some jump to him. He was actually returning punts at one point. He was in the punt return group. So he's somebody to keep an eye on. He's undersized. And that's one thing I think. Listen, this might not be a problem for the Giants at all, but I do think you guys as fans should be ready when you go out at training camp to watch him practice. You should be ready to look at their running back group and say, we are small, because Singletary's small. Miller is small. Tracy's 5'11", 210, but there's not a lot of beef at the running back position on the Giants roster at the moment. That's how I would say. And if you guys are just joining, speaking of beef at the running back position, just earlier today did a fun Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard episode with the one and only Brandon Jacobs. And we talked about the celebrity softball game coming up that LPG, Dexter Lawrence, and Jacobs have going in Pomona on Saturday. So everybody go get your tickets. I think it's sexydexygame.com. You can go there. You can donate. Parking lot's open, I think, at 12:30, 2 p.m. The gates open. And then they have, I think it's dodgeball, home run derby, softball game, etc. Should be cool. And but I had really fun interview with Brandon Jacobs, and that's going to be dropping on Tuesday morning, May 14th. Make sure you check that out. We'll also do a story for the Daily News where I kind of aggregate myself and, write out some of Brandon's best quotes. All right, let's see. NFL Beast of the East says, with a crowded wide receiver room around 14 guys, who is making the cut? Yeah. So let's see. Let's take a look at the depth chart right now. So right now, the Giants depth chart, you got Malik Neighbors 1. You've got Jalen Hyatt 2. You've got Wan'Dale Robinson 3. Let's put Darius Slayton on the team for right now because he's still on the team. And like we were talking about earlier, it's not like there's some great receiver room that can afford to get rid of the guy who's led them for the last 5 years. So Slayton would be 4. After that, I mean, I think the Allen Robinson signing definitely is related to getting a veteran in the room with neighbors. I do think that's a factor, but that's a guy with pedigree. So right now, you're asking me this right now. I would put Allen Robinson in that room, and then after that, well, you have Miles Boykin, who is a special teamer. So maybe let's call it 7. So it's Miles Boykin, and then after that, it'll depend on who wins these returner jobs, right? Like, is it Gunner because he's returning punts for you? Is Isaiah McKenzie beating out a Gunner Olszewski and you're keeping him? Bryce Ford Wheaton, obviously a guy who, unfortunately got hurt last year, but before he got hurt was showing promise as a gunner and learning the ropes as a receiver. And then Isaiah Hodgins, a veteran who came back. I was surprised Hodgins came back, especially with how they were kind of phasing him out last year. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. So we'll see. All right, we got another super chat in here. Big Dash says, Pat, we need a Carmen Brasillo interview. I need to know if they plan on switching the blocking scheme up. Need to better fit the guys we have. All right, Big Dash, I'll get on it, man. I will get on it. I did talk to Carmen Brasillo at the NFL Combine. Definitely a guy who, comes off as relatable. He's well respected. I know the Giants were prioritizing him early, and like as much as I and others pointed out how essentially they were scouring the earth for a defensive coordinator, and we're losing guys left and right to other jobs or staying at their own jobs. Brasillo, conversely, was a guy that they wanted and they got, right? He was like a priority for them that they wanted and got. So I will try to make that happen. A lot of these O-line coaches, outside of Googe, Dave DeGuglielmo, outside of Googe, a lot of these offensive linemen aren't these offensive line coaches, Big Dash, as you probably know, aren't eager necessarily to, get on camera and do interviews like that. So that could be the kind of interview that ends up in the newspaper and in the Daily News website and not on the podcast. But I will do my best to get that to you and to kind of get into more of the details of what that will look like for you, because you're absolutely right. We were talking about this earlier a little bit, that it is a confluence of a lot of things. It's the personnel, it's the coaching, it's how do you set them up to succeed. It's not putting guys in position to fail. It's steering them away from weaknesses and into their strengths, right? Using Azudu the way they did last year, a good exhibit A of how not to manage a player, right? Versus how Andrew Thomas has developed. But also, like you said, what type of schemes are you using? In 2022, when they went to the playoffs, you had, what was it? Was it power that they ran 8 times in a row in Jacksonville? I think it was. And they were pulling Azudu as, I think, left guard to the right side to block for Saquon. And I was the one sitting there in Jacksonville who pointed out they just ran this play 7 times in a row or 8 times in a row, whatever it was. That's just one example. But, getting to things that work and sticking with them and identifying that early, Big Dash, especially getting the team and the group of 5 together early and making sure they're forming a chemistry that's going to be necessary come the fall, because the clock is ticking, right? The clock is ticking. Bill says things were going so well for both our Knicks and our Rangers too. Big Dash, thanks for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Things are going so well for both Knicks and Rangers. Yep. Adversity, as always, as we know. D-Kid says, I know it's only minicamp, but did the Giants run an organized camp? I'm expecting you to say yes, but I had to ask. Yeah, they made it look a lot like their practices tend to look like. Unfortunately, in my opinion, like, I hate seeing, for example, Malik Neighbors, you could tell he wanted to do more than he did. Obviously, there's no reason to make a guy do too much when you're in his situation. You saw Roma Dunze with a sore hamstring after his first practice in Chicago. These guys have had long springs, so you don't want to get anybody hurt. But, just like they do during the regular season, during the special teams period, they have a lot of the receivers just standing over on the side, like playing soft toss with Mike Groh, the receivers coach, and each other for like 10 minutes or whatever it is. And it's just there's just not enough work going on in that early portion of practice for me, for my liking. But, as far as how they were doing it at rookie minicamp, they were making it look like they were doing individual buildups position by position, then going to sides of the ball. They were putting guys in coverage situations and return situations on special teams. So you get to see how people run. As I mentioned earlier, Keontae Lusk, for example, the corner, just jumped out to me. He was a tryout. He didn't end up signing, but just jumped out to me in the open field as like, wow, who is that? Right. Like guys just stand out. But yes, it was organized for sure. Chris says, best place I could see Slayton going would be Kansas City. Look in that receiver room. It doesn't look good. I mean, every receiver would want to go from anywhere to Kansas City, right? D Kid says, I don't know everyone is rushing to kick Slayton out the door. The dude is a good player. Yes, he is. Bill says, Chris, we already gave them 2 receivers. That's funny. All right, who do we have checking in here? Ryan checks in and says, Ryan, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you. Ryan says, what is your take on Dabol dropping so much weight, and how will this impact his ability to manage such an overcrowded wide receiver room? Well, so Ryan, this is actually something that Dabol has done in the past. It was, I want to say, was it his first season? It might have been his first season where he showed up when he got the job looking like one size. And then for training camp, he had lost a lot of weight going into camp, I think it was. And I think, Ryan, that Dabol tries hard in the offseason to eat healthier, to live healthier, to get in that kind of better shape. And, the stresses of the season, and this isn't just him, but, coaches in general. I mean, you end up, like I remember Joe Judge basically drank like 100 coffees a day. Or, I think he was like me, where he would get a Dunkin' Donuts coffee, drink a quarter of it, and then put it down, go do something, come back and be cold. So he goes, gets another one, drinks a quarter of that one, puts it down, right? Like every coach has like their thing. And so Brian Dabol, I think you can tell, ends up in some of these tough seasons, ends up doing a little stress eating, which so do I, right? So I do the same thing, right? No one's judging here, but I'm just, you asking me and I'm telling you, Dabol has put weight on during these stressful seasons and then taking it off in the off seasons. So, trying to be healthier, trying to stay healthier. And, he's going for it. It's good to see. You'd like to see people live healthier and live healthy lives and looking better. It's always funny, like when you see Dabol coming out of the cafeteria sometimes when we're walking past and going to the locker room, you always kind of say to him, what's on the plate there? Because he'll be carrying his plate out, let's say, to like his office. And, I remember one time it was, like quinoa and a salad and this and that. And then the next time he had something healthy on the plate, and then he had another plate underneath it, and it was hidden by the top plate. And underneath he had like 2 chocolate chip cookies. So, he's just like us. He's just like us, right? So that's what I would say. Brian Dabol, in many ways, in that regard, just like us. All right. Trying to get through your questions. I'm sorry I'm doing a lot of talking here, but I'll get to all of them. Don't worry about it. Let's see. D-Kit says, how about Aaron Jones taking a pay cut last year for the Packers, had a very good year, and then they crush him with the Jacobs signing and release him. That was awful. Yeah, especially after what he did in the playoffs for them against Dallas. No loyalty in the NFL. I don't blame any player for standing up for themselves. Chris says you don't pay number 3 wide receiver in the NFL. That's right. Enrique says they got to bring back Slayton. They moved money around. They could do it. Could be what ultimately happens. Joey B says Slayton's not going anywhere. Here's our guy, and we got to rock with him. He deserves it for being on these trash teams. Pay that man. Well, they didn't operate that way with the guy who was the face of their franchise, their running back. So are they really going to do that with Darius, right? But again, there's more at play there than just what they think he's worth, in my opinion. Why the fan base should have any confidence in Jones when their own team does not. Chris, I completely agree with you 150%. Just talking to some guys today, I said, I've said this to you guys. I'm not let's see. I am not, when I talk about Daniel Jones and when it sounds critical or negative about the outlook, more of what I'm talking about is what I know the Giants think of him or how they've been operating and what certain people, their decision makers, think of him more than what I think of him. Like it's more about the lay of the land as I see it based on how I know they're operating and what their decision makers were trying to do and trying to replace him and all of that. Like it's way more about that. Luann, what's going on? Luann, the eternal optimist, is back. She's great. Luann creates balance to these live chats. Hey Pat, great stuff as always. Thanks, says Jackie Chan. Appreciate you, Jackie. Hey, Danny Dimes is a good quarterback. Look at his first year in the playoffs 2 seasons ago, says Luann. Luann, it's definitely only fair to bring up his good football, but like I always, when you say, what about the playoffs 2 years ago? I say, well, he played a really good game and then he laid a complete egg and they got their doors blown off and the game was over like 5 minutes into it, right? So what I mean is like historic performance against Minnesota and then historically bad against the Eagles. So winning a playoff game is great. It counts. It's a feather in his cap. You can't take it away from him. That's obviously a huge reason why he got a 4-year, $160 million extension, right? It is the reason why. But you do have to remember the full context. Both things count. Let's see. The guys have been together for 2 years, Pat, Kafka and Tierney. I'm sure they have a good relationship, says D-Kit. Yeah, no, I'm not saying they don't. But D-Kit, wait. Just because guys work together doesn't mean they have a great relationship. But yeah, no, in answer to that question earlier, none of my reporting has been anything about, Kafka and Tierney butting heads. Like that's nothing I've reported. Let's see. Authentic says Pat be hooping. Let's go. Hey, I'm not gonna lie too. I was shooting the nets were burning up tonight. It was like NBA Jam style. I was knocking them down tonight. Not to toot my own horn. If I didn't play well, I just wouldn't say anything. D-Kid says it's Dabol's neck on the line, his team, his responsibility. If it was me, I would want to call the plays if I was the best one at it. Just saying. Yeah, I totally agree. Rich says, any chance we sign Calais Campbell? Haven't heard that. Haven't heard Calais Campbell's name mentioned. I would think like that's a good example there of a player who like he's a 6-time Pro Bowler, right? Former All-Pro, all that. He's 38, I think. He's about to turn 38. He's 37 years old. To me, I know he played in Atlanta last year. I would think he would want to play somewhere where he either got paid or could win or both. And New York's not that. I haven't heard anything. I can't tell you yes or no, but that doesn't sound obvious to me. A2Z Me says, hey Pat, really appreciate these live streams. Hope the channel keeps growing. Thank you, A2Z Me. Question, who were your media inspirations growing up? That's a great question. Gary Smith, the writer for Sports Illustrated, is a huge inspiration of mine. I've actually never met Gary, which is very interesting. But his writing style, his storytelling, like I've been a subscriber to Sports Illustrated since I was, I don't know, 8 years old. I'm 7 years old, 8 years old, something like that. And I'm not talking about SI for Kids, which I was also a subscriber to, and my son's a subscriber to now. I'm talking about I've been a subscriber to SI, the main magazine, for that long. And I would read it cover to cover. And that was a big inspiration. That was a huge influence on me. And, Ernest Hemingway was always a writer who his style and ability I always respected a lot and read a lot. And, writing was always the thing I got into initially. That was the thing I started with. And my passions were sports and writing. And that was how I got into this business, was trying to combine the two things I loved most. And, I was better at writing than really anything else. I felt like, let's combine this and do what I love for a living. Because I recognized early as a kid that I think no matter what you do, most likely you're going to end up working a ton and working a lot day in and day out, week in, week out, month, years, and for most of your life. And so you should probably try to enjoy what you do. And that's a main reason why I tried to go this route. I've been very fortunate. People have helped me over the years and supported me and mentored me. And so very fortunate in that regard. But yeah, as far as like on camera, television, things like that, I would say nowadays, like, I'm very, you take different things from everybody. So like Bruce Beck, for example, is excellent at what he does. He's the consummate professional. He's the top of the pyramid in local news and sports, and he's recognizable everywhere. You would think that things get handed to him because he's worked his way to the top. He works harder than anybody, right? He works harder than anybody. He goes everywhere. He plugs into every team. He makes sure that he knows everybody. He says hi to everybody. Like, his ability on camera, his advice and his professionalism, like those are all things that, Bruce is somebody I really admire and who is a huge influence on what I do, instills confidence in me. And just have a lot of mentors and people who have taught me different things along the way. But as far as media inspirations, I think Gary Smith is always the one I come back to because I always just feel like a great story beats everything. And, you could tell when you read Gary Smith's stories that it was like you were living in them while you were reading them. I don't know how else to put it. Let's see. But yeah, certainly in this space now, A2Z me, like, people like Nick Wright has been very supportive of me. I know people don't always agree with his takes necessarily, but Colin Cowherd is so good. I mean, he is so good at what he does. And I like listening to him. I like listening to John Middlecoff, who's on that Volume Sports Network as well. Has a great NFL podcast, does great work. So those are some things that come to mind. But that's a really good question. You got me reflecting here. BBU says, Pat, the longer Adoree sits on the market, is it possible he could return for the right price ahead of camp, or has that ship sailed? I don't know if the Giants necessarily closed the door there, but I do know that they were not enamored with his play last season. So my interpretation of how they were talking about him coming out of last season was like, didn't play very well, not interested was the vibe I got. So obviously things could change, but that was the vibe I got. Let's see. A2Z Me said the Hurricanes slapped the Rangers back to reality tonight. You have to earn the win. You can't just show up and expect to finish off a team, no doubt. Joey B says, how long before we can actually be a cap-friendly team and able to go get some ballers? Well, probably the next time you're on a rookie quarterback contract. D-Kid says, Chapman is very explosive, the defensive lineman they just signed. I live in Dallas, and I went to a few SMU games. He had a few TFLs. The fans love the guy. Interesting. Authentic, my man. Yep. I appreciate you making the B-ball comment earlier. Thanks for being here, Authentic. Love it. Let's see. Is Azudu still on the roster? Yes, he is. The Giants utterly failed with the O-lineman they rostered last year. No other way to look at it, says D-Kit. Agree. Joey B says, Authentic, this is the only live. Love it. Bill says that has $42. Wow. I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Bill. Is that the new veteran minimum contract the Giants are doling out to somebody? Rich says, hey, Pat, I hope Waller returns. We need another real offensive threat. It would take some pressure off Neighbors' shoulders his rookie year, attract less doubles. Number one's game planning to stop Hyatt or Wandale. Rich, I agree. The injuries are a question mark. The commitment to the game is a question mark. But, that's a fair point by you. The difference in how the skill groups look based on that. Right, or Slayton. Mm-hmm. All right, let's see. Dan says, will outside corner 2 be an open battle between Flott, Trey Hawkins, and McLeod? I don't think Hawkins will win it. I think Hawkins' training camp last year kind of got our hopes up, but we saw in the reality, like when we watched him play in real games, it was the speed of the game and the challenge of what he had to accomplish there was was too great. Now he could continue to develop in that regard. He certainly looks the part as far as his build, but I'm not counting on him as that player. I do think he could turn into a competition between Flott and McLeod, but Dan, that's why I think it really is interesting that Dabol specifically said he has confidence in Flott at that spot, because that indicates that while there is competition, that he has an eye on this young player grabbing that spot. And of course, he's a draft pick of Joe Shane's as well. So frankly, that sounds like less of a competition than you expect, but it should be, and you have to expect it will be come camp. Bill says, I know I'm irrational about Tommy DeVito. I always want to support the show. I pay my way. Bill, you're the man. Joey B says, I like Asante, the wide receiver. I think he's going to be Cruz, honestly. Whoa. Man, if they pop somebody like that, let's go. Intel says, glad you were excited. I have no hope for this season. Well, Intel, I'm not projecting the Giants to have a great season here, but I do think there are a ton of fascinating storylines to discuss. And of course, there's a lot of change that has happened on this team from last year to this year. So there's a lot of new to talk about with the Giants. Now, obviously, we'd rather there wasn't, right, when it comes to steadiness and consistency, but the Giants haven't been able to figure it out yet. So they do need new blood. They are a very young team. They are a very young team with a lot of new coaches. It's just going to be very hard to put together. So Intel, I'm not, I don't disagree with your forecast of how this could go for sure. But I think there's a lot of exciting elements to discuss. And frankly, I know the NFL contrives a lot of content to keep everybody interested year round now, but I do enjoy the schedule release. I really get a lot out of that, partially because I like booking all my hotel rooms and trying to get my travel situated, and that's all fun. It clarifies what my fall is going to look like, right? My job schedule. But also, like I said, it really points in a big way to how the Giants are going to do in the season, because really the way they've started the last 2 years is how their seasons have gone. And you wouldn't think that would be the case because these seasons keep getting longer and longer. A lot of people now say, well, your NFL team, you don't even know what you are to week 5. But for the Giants, what we've seen is how they've done by week 5 really has dictated what their season's going to be. So they know that too, that they've said that out loud. They know they have to start fast. That's number one. Bill says, I love Bellinger, but the way Theo can high point the ball at the catch is, yeah, no doubt. Let's see. D-Kit wants Steven Nelson a corner. What's good, Hirsch? Good to see you. Steven says, Pat, do you have the scoop of Daniel Jones? Will he be ready for training camp? That's what he projected. That's what Daniel projected. That's all we can go on for now. Nothing from the organization. Brian Dabol saying nothing. I mean, nothing about it. So that didn't instill confidence to me. Let's go Giants. Rebuild in full effect, says Steven. Let's be patient with Shane Dabol regime. Great years are coming for the G-men. All right. Some optimism there. Luann, you got a friend here in Stephen G. Jay Jan says, thank you, Pat. Your answers are always legit. Jay Jan, thank you for the super stickers, super chats. Appreciate it. Big Dash says, hit that like button, folks. To Big Dash, thank you so much for saying that. Really respect your content and all you give to the Giants community as well. Thanks for being here again. Bill says, hey, Dash, good video on Tyrone today. I enjoyed it. Going to have to go check out that video as well. Tyrone, if you guys haven't seen it, if they have it on the Giants website, go and watch at some point the Tyrone Tracy press conference with us outside after practice on Saturday. Really good interview and conversation. Joe says, "What's up, Giants fam? Just tuning in. What impact, if any, does the Jared Goff extension have on the Giants' plans in the future?" Well, I mean, he was one of the many quarterbacks who, kind of like in the Tua situation where people were wondering, okay, he's a good quarterback, but is his team really going to double down, triple down on him, or are they going to grease the skids to move on at some point? They have Hendon Hooker in the building already. Like, are they going to play out the string there, and will he come available at some other point? So now he won't. He's locked up. He's a Detroit Lion. So that, to me, like if you're the Giants and you were looking Jared Goff coming available down the line, that's not happening, right? What do you guys think of this? I was debating this with talking about this with some of the other beat guys today. Well, how do you stack up Jared Goff versus Daniel Jones? And what I mean by that is, do you think Jared Goff and Daniel Jones could be similarly productive if they both had good offensive lines and supporting casts, right? Because we all know, Goff's played on the Rams and Lions, and Daniel Jones has played on the Giants, right? And we all know what the Giants have been going through, offensive line, et cetera. But obviously, Daniel's had his shortcomings. Goff's had his shortcomings, but also thrown a lot of touchdown passes and is now leading one of the most explosive offenses in the league. Just curious how you guys see that. Stephen G says, all the real Giants fans are in here. Let's go Big Blue. Yeah, Stephen. Let's see. Simeon says, and the heat is immediately on for new coaches, no doubt. Yes, right. There is pressure on the new coaches because it's not their fault, but they're walking into a situation where the head coach is on the hot seat and where the GM's got some warmth underneath his as well. So the pressure is on the guys who are new, no doubt. Kyler says, who and what is to blame for our downfall since 2008? We can never seem to get straightened out. We're the Giants. I just don't get how we have been so bad and always seem like a laughingstock. Well, Kyler, ownership really, I think, grew frustrated and sensitive to this suggestion that they were overly involved and impacting it in a negative way. And certainly they were the ones overseeing those two Super Bowls in 2007 and 2011 too. So it's fair for them to kind of stand up and say, well, wait a second, we did this. Why are you saying that we're a problem, right? But I think in many ways, the Giants, obviously the offensive line has been a huge problem. The draft has been a problem for the Giants, Kyler, in my opinion. And that's, not just this GM, Gettleman, obviously. And then, going back to Jerry Reese, there were players that Jerry hit on, but then some drafts where you were looking for a lot more when it came to finding depth to kind of reinforce the roster and kind of sustain a consistent level of play. So the Giants as a franchise, I think in the draft have struggled compared to others. And then, but the big picture has been ownership's involvement in key major decisions, quarterback, right. Eli Geno Smith, like John Mara signing off on that, frequent firings of head coaches, not letting any kind of program take hold and sustain itself. They haven't been able to build anything constant or consistent and lasting. Now, obviously, losing seasons or losing locker rooms or whatever it is can lead to guys losing their jobs. But doing that, then marrying Judge and Gettleman together rather than just trying to pair two people together on the same page, kind of the way that they just did with Joe Shane and Brian Dabol belatedly now with this regime. So there's a lot of different ways, in my opinion, Kyler, that, it goes back to the draft, it goes back to personnel evaluation. But I think in a large part, too, ownership has been involved in key major decisions over the years that have impacted the organization in a detrimental way, even though the intentions were good. And also, they've had a significant problem staying healthy. The injuries have been a problem. They, in my opinion, need to take a stronger and closer look at all of those things, at changing the way they operate those things, whether it comes to how the team practices, when they're giving guys day off and rest, when they're returning them to the field, all of those things. Like, I really believe draft, injuries, ownership, right? Those are the consistents. And you could even blame ownership, like when there's head coaches who come in and don't look like they're ready. That's owners hire, right? So that it comes back to them. Eric says, call Kareem Hunt or Carolina for Chuba Hubbard. They have 3 running backs. Simeon says, I've been saying we need at least one big short yardage back for a year now. Tariq says, the media was wrong about trying to set Neighbors up about betting with his friend. This is why athletes can't trust the media to make it about Vegas. Shaking my head. No, Tariq, actually, to be honest with you, when I heard Neighbors say that during that Pivot podcast, I aggregated it and wrote it up a lot along with many of his other quotes. But it was a noteworthy thing. And to be honest, when he said it, it sounded to me like it could be an issue, but I didn't know specifically if it was an issue, and I wasn't sure. And I didn't go into minicamp, feeling any type of way about that other than wondering what his position was going to be on it, because clearly it had started to gain traction in the public eye because Jaden Daniels was being asked about it. He got asked about it on Keyshawn Johnson's podcast, then at Washington's camp. And so it kind of built up like that. And frankly, Tariq, it's a good thing that Daniels and Neighbors handled it the way they did on that weekend, because you can get suspended indefinitely for doing what he said that they were doing. So no, I wasn't freaking out about that at all, but you definitely just, you don't want things like that clouding what's happening. Right. And also he's only 20 years old. So I thought, to me, it was just an example of, here's a young guy who's walking in as the number 6 overall pick, who has a lot to learn, but he has to learn fast because he has to be the leader of the team. But no, I'm not sitting here killing Malik Neighbors over that right now. No. I mean, but it was a worthwhile question. D Kid says, Pat, serious question, no troll. Which starting quarterback other than the rookies would you not take over Jones with his injury history and performance? Let's see. Let's look at the NFL quarterback stats for 2023. And look at this. I gotta be honest. I'm not a crazy fan of Tua. I think that they have a really smart scheme there, and they protected him. He scares me. Let's see. Baker Mayfield. I mean, listen, all these guys, I'm saying they're throwing 29, 28 touchdown passes. So I see your point. I see your point. Gardner Minshew. You taking Gardner Minshew over Daniel Jones? I don't know. Russell Wilson. Would you guys have wanted Russell Wilson here to start instead of him? Who else are we looking at? Aiden O'Connell. If he ends up the starter in Vegas instead of Gardner. Let's see. I see your point, D-Kit. See your point. Let's see. Who else do we got? All right, trying to get through the queue. D-Kit, thanks for all the support. Really appreciate it. And I think, to kind of expand on that, which I owe that to you here, but I think, how do I put this? I think Daniel is going to be more successful at his next stop. Like, I think the next team he goes to, when he gets a chance to play there, I think that Daniel is going to look better, because I think now, of course, it depends on where he goes, where does he end up, who's his coach, right? All those things. But I do think that he's gotten to the point where change of scenery necessary, better O-line necessary. He's not going to put a team on his back like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or whatever. And listen, even Patrick Mahomes lately, with the weapons he doesn't have, right, with his offensive line deteriorated a little bit last year, he wasn't carrying the Chiefs left and right every week. Like, they found other ways to win games to support him, and he can make key throws at key times. And then when he needed to take over down the stretch in the big games and in the Super Bowl, he does it, right? So yeah. So I think it's fair, D-Kit, for you to point out that it's not even just the play, it's the injury history, and it's the investment, and it's the cap space you're spending on a player who the organization is not showing full confidence in, right? It's all of that. Giants Blue-Blooded says, hold on a second. I think I skipped a couple there. Big Dash says, appreciate you, Pat. Thank you, Big Dash. You too. Antoine says, love this guy, Big Dash. Great content. Thank you, Antoine. And yes, Big Dash does provide great content. Christian says he loves Slayton. Blue-Blooded says, initial thoughts on what the secondary is going to look like. Well, right now it's Banks as an outside corner, Flott outside corner based on what Dabol said if they're not signing anyone over him. And then the slot corner would either be Jalen Mills, Drew Phillips, or Darnay Holmes. My guess, this is just my guess. No one told me this. My guess is it would be possibly, if Phillips isn't ready yet, Mills would be like in a rotation there with Phillips until he got his feet wet or was proved capable of handling it full time. Holmes obviously provides some veteran value there as well, but we know Darnay is a guy who he can make some plays on the ball. Very good blitzer, tackler, and a gamer, like a true pro. But he has struggled in coverage, right? Holding penalties, things of that nature. So he's a known commodity. Not sure what their plan is there exactly, but there's a lot of pressure, on Tyler Nubin to step in as a second-round pick. It looks like as a starter. Again, I think, listen, you're going to want him starting. Jalen Mills is a guy who has safety and corner versatility. So I think probably ways that they can find to get him on the field, depending on which rookies are stepping up and which aren't. But definitely, I think it shapes up to look like Pinnock and Nubin in the back. Mills working in as a third safety / corner at times. Flott and Banks on the outside. The slot corner position, we'll see Mills sometimes, Phillips sometimes. To be honest, I think there's a lot of youth and inexperience out there. I think the plan looks like a plan of hope. In other words, hopefully Deonte Banks takes the next step. Hopefully Cordell Flott takes the next step. Hopefully Drew Phillips steps in well as a rookie. Hopefully Tyler Nubin plays well as a rookie. Hopefully Jason Pinnock raises his level as well without Xavier McKinney back there. They're going to be working with these guys, working to develop them, working to form them into a new group with a new identity. And certainly there is talent in that unit. I do think it'll be a challenge, though, both because of their youth and inexperience, and also because it's not an obvious lockdown unit. I think it points to the pass rush needing to support them in a more significant way and not allow the quarterbacks back there to spend too much time looking downfield. Tariq says fans want Slayton to be traded so the Giants can tank properly. Are you serious or kidding? Because that's funny either way, but that could be true too. Where are my entertainers? Says hit the like button. It's so easy. Thank you, entertainers. Daz says, I wish Daniel Jones would stand his ground more when he's on the podium. His passiveness doesn't help with anyone's confidence in him. Yeah, he's just trying not to say what's on his mind. That's my experience. Patrick says, first time on the Talkin Ball Live podcast, Pat. Love the show. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for being here. Please subscribe if you're new to the channel. You'll if you can or you want to, you can turn on notifications to the channel. And so it'll pop up anytime I post a YouTube short with updates from practice or news, breaking news. Anytime I do a podcast and post that new on the channel, anytime we do these YouTube lives and schedule them, it'll pop up and alert you and tell you when it's coming up, when it's going down. I think people really get something out of that. The channel is at PL on NFL. We are the same handle at PL on NFL, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Threads. On X, I'm P Leonard NYDN, and I'm the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. And we're here on the Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard podcast with the Believe Network. And we're going strong. This is a great community that we've built here. Thanks to you guys. If you're new, like Patrick Evans here, we do post-game live chats. So after the games, I come out of the locker room, I finish up my stories for the Daily News, and then I jump on with you guys, Talkin Ball Live. And we go live and I tell you everything that I heard and saw in the locker room, on the field, at the stadium, home games, road games, if we're in Germany, whatever the case may be. I do it all. And then we are also this week, we are doing, so today is May 13th, Monday. Okay, I'm losing track of my days here. Wednesday, the 15th, is the NFL schedule release. We are going to be going live at 8 o'clock as the NFL is releasing the schedule. And I'm going to be talking to you guys about the Giants schedule, what it means, what the matchups mean, how significant it is, who they're facing and when. And we're going to get into it. I'll do schedule predictions. We can talk about and we can debate how we think the Giants are going to fare and come up with kind of like a collaborative communal assessment of whether the schedule looks strong or weak or whether it's stacked hard at the beginning or end or whatever it is. And I think we'll come out of that enjoying that. So I'm looking forward to that. So we'll still be planning on, as of now, Monday and Thursday, but adding a special Wednesday live chat because I think we'll get a lot out of it as a group and a community here. Simeon says, if competition was fair, Locke would beat out Daniel Jones. We may see. Ryan says, D-Kit is blowing up the feed. Dude, D-Kit is dedicated. He's intelligent. He's got great questions, and he supports the channel with these super stickers and super chats. Really appreciate you. Christian says, I think DJ was inherited and ownership wanted to give him a chance. I think there's a longer leash on Shane and Dabol than the media makes it out to be. Well, Christian, it could be different between Shane and Dabol, especially because Dabol's problems last year were really many of his creation. It's very much a real thing. And so, there could be more patience with the general manager, but the coach is somebody who really, there's a lot of people who are no longer in the building because of the head coach. D-Kid says, Pat, with you talking about your hoop game, I'm thinking all shoot and no defense. Definitely not. I'm like the Wojo, pound the floor, pull the shorts up, in my stance doing slides, point guard, defending point guard guy. I catch fire every once in a while, but definitely more of trying to be like that steady Northeast point guard who catches fire every once in a while. But definitely don't we all love sometimes turning it into the shooting guard? Come on. Let's see. I'm thinking your inspirations were Dick Young, Jerry Eisenberg, maybe even Lupica. Let's see. K-Max says, I go back to 1983 Sports Illustrated. Cheryl Teagues. All right. Crunch Bunch says, Giants wanted to upgrade to a quarterback with elite upside in the draft, but do they still think DJ can be a fringe top 10 QB that they projected based on conversations you had? They do think that he can be that fringe top 10 quarterback they projected, especially from John Mara and ownership point of view. I think that they are also aware, though, and I think this especially comes into the Shane Dabol equation. First of all, with the injury history and some of the decision-making in key spots that wasn't ideal, there's very much concern that, optimally it can look good, but it might be hard to get to what is optimal with him, and it doesn't happen consistently enough, right? So I think that's part of the issue. Also, Dabol has ran a certain offense in Buffalo with Josh Allen, and with Daniel Jones, he's been coaching around his strengths and away from his weaknesses in certain situations. But last year, it really backfired, trying to open it up and put more on his shoulders in that regard. Now, obviously, it wasn't all on Daniel Jones, and we've talked about that. But, very much, I think, from a GM coach side, a look at, hey, is there a way that we can open up this offense? Yes, it's probably by getting a quarterback who can do more of the things we're looking to do at a high level, even if it means developing him in the future. And Daniel Jones can do a lot of these certain things well at certain points, but has a ceiling. That's my view from the conversations I've had with them of how they view him and why they were trying to move on and replace him, but also paid him that money and are running it back with him. On that note, I'm not sure if those people's opinions align with Dabol and Shane's of DJ, he says. Okay, I got you. Bill says your new hat is $42. $42? Get out of here. This hat? No way. Are you serious? Holy cow. I was looking to see if there was like a golden ticket in it, like Willy Wonka, like where you got something else for free. Sal says, when Joe Shane says we need, Bill, that's crazy, man. $42. Sal says, when Joe Shane says we need to be patient, has anyone asked him to specify what that means? Is it not reasonable to ask him what he's expecting in 2024 from the roster he has created? Yeah, Sal, I think it's pressing back on that. You just get it's self-preservation mode. Like it's the general manager who inherited a bad situation trying to reframe and remind people, like, look how bad it was when I got here, right? So when he says be patient, he's saying, if we have another bad season, don't judge me ultimately just on that. This is still a process of adding young players to a program and building it into something better. And I've said that before, but I thought that answer where he was listing all the guys on defense and how they need to gel and develop and play a lot together to form a core group that they can grow with was as much of an appeal to that as anything. El Jefe, what's going on? He says, what's up, Giants family, you crazy sons of bitches? That's right. Stanley says, when is the NFL releasing the new schedule? Wednesday, 8 p.m. Obviously, sometimes leaks happen during the day. Tell you what, guys, I try not to get involved in the schedule leaks too much because, how do I put this? I mean, listen, you get involved. There's too many accounts out there nowadays where you start some other reporters who are viewed as reputable. Maybe they take something that isn't official that they saw from somewhere and they get tricked, and then they start including it as official. And then it ends up being something that everybody parrots as truth, and then it turns out not to be true. I know there was some kind of confusion last year where some reporters were reporting that the Giants, something about like when they were on the road and at home against Washington was flipped, and it wasn't true, and the real schedule had it switched up. So you got to be careful with that stuff. That's why, like, even if I get a line on what the schedule is earlier, I really want to be careful. Like if you're not going to see me talking about it until I know when these games are happening, if that makes sense. Let's see. Mel says, I'm coming to camp in July. Daniel Jones has crap around him. Nation, more than capable enough. They're using some Mel's. I'm not exactly sure. Sorry, I'm not exactly sure. It seemed like some non sequiturs. All right. What I got from that is you're coming to training camp in July. I hope to see you there. Alex says, Pat, how we doing tonight, big homie? I am baked, but still down to talk ball. Alex, you are welcome here while baked. You are welcome here while baked. Thank you for being here, man. Bill says, Hefe just hiding out here while the Rangers self-destruct needed some positivity. That's right. Stanley said, hey, Pat, how's Bryce Ford Wheaton doing? Stanley, in camp, I guess you're saying. I will say this. Bryce Ford Wheaton was on the field, with the team on the sideline, kind of catching some passes softly off to the side. He wasn't running or anything. But, like, this was at the end of last season. Like, he was already kind of getting back around the team, getting back on the grass, like that kind of thing. So I was very encouraged by that and have only heard good things about his progress. We'll see how he's looking when we get out on the field for these OTAs coming up. Yeah, so we'll see. All right, let's see. Tariq says Giants will improve from the very bottom. They will be in the lottery. And if you think they're making the playoffs, take the needle out of your arms. Oh, Tariq, I don't know. I'm not sure anybody really thinks they're making the playoffs. El Jefe says, Pat, thanks for the New York Revival shout out on your last show. Oh, you got it, El Jefe, man. You guys doing good work, good content. And, I say this every podcast, and I know it probably gets old, but I am like so blown away by how supportive and appreciative you guys are as a community, as fans. You're diehards. And what I love about this is, listen, let's just be honest, like Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, it can be such a nasty place. And I've had plenty of experiences on there where I don't respond much on there, but there have been some really, really tough times dealing with some of the stuff that people say on there, to the point where you're like, what is this group of people that I'm even serving? Like, this is so crazy. I'm trying to work hard, trying to bring them, the insight, knowledge, honesty, whatever it is. And in my view, it was always like the Giants were struggling. And so a lot of the content was critical because it was like, here's what's happening, even though it's not good, but here's what I'm telling you. Right. And, it's just a really nasty environment. And what I've learned being on these chats and on the Talkin Ball live Q&As, especially with you guys, and also listening to your content on other channels, your channels, is that there is a core group of fans who are really dedicated to like detailed conversations about the team. And I'm so grateful to have found you guys and to have connected with you guys and for us to have these conversations and chats, because like, it's just, I've been doing this for a while. And obviously when you're writing for an audience, but you're not interacting with them while you're doing it. Right. And so this is just an awesome compliment to the writing and reporting I do. And this is my favorite part of the job right now, is coming on with you guys. And, this isn't even my daily news job. I started this off to the side and it complements what I do, but this is my favorite thing that I do right now. Christian says, Darren Waller's trade was a mistake, got too high on the first year success. I see the first 2 years as free, as they had to purge the roster. We need to be competitive against good teams. Yes, no. And like we talk about, another reason why, even though like Joe Shane is a guy who needs to do better. He needs to improve his track record as Giants GM. That's like you said, that was a mistake. It was an effort at improvement, but it was a mistake. Deilla says, how's it going, Pat? Everyone's in the stream. That's right, man. That's what I was just saying. Thank you, Deilla. Welcome. And I know it's crazy. K-Max says, Goff is greater than Jones under any and all circumstances. D-Kid says, Goff and Jones is not close. Goff is a superior passer, pre-snap and post. He's more accurate, has a better arm, just better. Jones is more of a running threat. That's it. Dilla says, our teams in the early 2000s were built around the pass rush. We got away from bringing in true talent at that position to build upon that and putting a solid line in place. No, that's well said, Dilla. And I think I do view the Brian Burns, that kind of, really amazingly expensive and aggressively seemingly desperate trade and signing. You can tell it's targeted directly at like, hey, when we've won, we've had great pass rushes. Like, let's go get a great pass rush or try to assemble a great pass rush. Right. So I think that's a really good point, Dilla. And I think that's clearly what the Giants are trying to do there. Stanley says, do you think the Eli benching by Ben McAdoo is a result of the Giants organization refusing to draft Patrick Mahomes, which ultimately led to him getting fired? Well, definitely McAdoo liked Mahomes. And if they end up drafting Mahomes, Stanley, then everything changes. But really, it was just a result of Eli, obviously, at that point was shot. And he's admitted that, since he played. And it was just a situation where the general manager and the owner and the coach were all involved in the conversation, and the owner signed off on it. But then ultimately, the coach ends up getting scapegoated for a move that was just as much the GM's, and the GM gets fired too. And then, initially it was viewed as, oh, look at all this outrage from the Giants fan base and the Giants organization and how it was handled. And then it turned out that John Mara actually signed off on it. So, let's see. Okay. Dilla says, not big on Jones at all at this point, but Goff would struggle mightily behind this line over the past 5 years, right? Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's interesting. Dilla says, now I don't see the Jaguars moving away from Trevor Lawrence, but he hasn't exactly lived up to expectations there. That's true. You know what's strange to me? Like, Lawrence is so damn tall. Like, you ever see him in person? Like, hard to imagine he doesn't see every spot on the field. I don't know. He just doesn't dice up defenses like you would think a guy who's as talented. He has that athletic ability. He can see over everybody. So, interesting that he hasn't kind of exploded there. Since you have to roll the pocket with this weak line, Russell Wilson would not have been a bad signing. Ricardo, no, I have not heard anything on a CB2 signing. It was interesting to hear Dabol say that Flott seems to have the inside track there. DeIlla, I think Goff is way better QB than Jones under any circumstance, says K-Mac. Christopher says, hey, Pat, everyone in the chat, 2 new signings, DT and DB. Yep. Ryan says, whoa, Pat is telling us it's over. Are you talking about over like as far as that this isn't going to be a good season? Yeah, I mean, Ryan, I'm not sitting here telling you the Giants, it's impossible for them to do good things this year. I'm just saying there's a lot of factors for why it's going to be an uphill climb. But this is why I'm excited to see the schedule, because if they can start fast and get some good feeling in there, and you got a young team, you get them to feel good about themselves, the new staff realizes, okay, this isn't impossible for us to like take this and go. Maybe one of these quarterbacks, whether it's Daniel, Drew Lock, Neighbors unlocks them. The offense starts scoring, right? Like, who knows? It could happen. But you need to start fast. Dilla says, yes, behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. My point is the guy can't move. He's a statue like Jared Goff, right? El Jefe says the Chiefs' defense was real good. Yes, it was. Yes, it was, right? It wasn't all Mahomes this year. My little cousin is rumored to be traded to Dallas from Kansas City, says Christopher Tony. Oh, yeah? What, you're saying Kadarius, there's a rumor that Kadarius is going to get traded to the Cowboys? Where are you hearing that, Chris? Let's see. Kadarius had one of his best game as a Giant in Dallas before he punched a guy in the head and got ejected. Dilla says Goff would do better on the Giants than Jones has or ever will. Can't be totally proven, but what do I think? But that's what I think. Tariq says, if you have any common sense, a friendly wager between friends should not be compared with betting on the game. There's legitimate reporting, and then there is the Sports Enquirer, BS for clicks. No, Tariq, the reason those players apologized and called off the bet is because the NFL, under their rules, like that's not legal. That's why they called off the bet. John says, hey, Pat, great show. I totally agree with Bruce Beck. With you on Bruce Beck. I used to work at a private school in West Jersey, and Bruce used to come and mentor the kids, and he did other stuff. I met him a couple times. He's amazing. Yep. K-Mac says, I worked with Bruce. Great guy. Sal says, the Giants 2024 motto, patience and hope. That's right. Sounds like 6 wins, Sal. Great, says K-Mac. Joey B says 4 wins. John says, hey, Pat, there used to be a guy named Dave Klein who wrote for the Star Ledger. He was a great local writer who covered the Giants for all the great years in the 80s and early 90s. Yes, that's right. That's right. Crunch Bunch says, I didn't know. I never knew Dave very well, only from a distance. Was disappointed to see the Giants social media team hype up the release date of the logo patch today. We were all anticipating an alternate uniform release. Hear anything about potential unis? No, it was actually made clear to the Giants from the media that that was what everybody had thought. Intel says another failed season. Stanley says, hey, Pat, what was the real reason the Giants traded Odell Beckham and Kadarius Toney? Odell Beckham Jr. was Dave Gettleman and, trying to pin it on what was best for the culture. There was a lot that went into that relationship deteriorating over the final year, even from Pat Shurmur and Odell perspective. And you remember the hematoma incident where Odell had the bruise in his leg and wasn't playing and practicing. Shurmur was pissed off at me after one day. There was a day, you guys will like this story. There was a day after, what did I write? It was a news story. I wrote a news story with some information about Odell's leg injury and this hematoma, and the Giants' expectations for what he could do versus what he was, and something about the inner workings of kind of the touchiness of their situation or disagreement. And whatever I wrote pissed Pat Shurmur off. So we come in, I think it was a Thursday, because Thursdays under Shurmur, what he would do is he would do like a small group with the reporters who were there, no cameras. And it would be, especially in these Giant seasons when the team starts losing and, it gets late in the season, like it ends up like there's not many of you there. So it was like 5 of us standing in a little circle talking to Shurmur. And we walk up to Pat Shurmur and he says hi to everybody. And then he looks at me and goes like this. He's just staring at me. And so somebody asked a question. He's staring at me in the face. Somebody asked a question like over here. Let's just say it was Jordan. So he turns and he goes, yeah, answers a question. And then he looks back at me and goes. So I'm standing there going, whoo, boy, right? So that we're standing like this far away from each other. And then like, let's say Dan Duggan over here asks a question and Shurmur looks over at him and he answers him and then he goes. It was so tense. Like it was amazingly tense. And I asked him like 2 questions or whatever it was. But boy, oh my goodness. You could have cut the tension with a knife. It's great. Let's see. Tariq, chill out, man. Be cool. Let's see. Deilla says, the teams we play this year consist of some leagues best at the running back position. Henry, Taylor, Barkley, Jones, Walker, Charbonnet, Harris, Jalen Warren. Front 7 will be tested. And that's a great point, Deilla. And I know that's where that Calais Campbell question I know comes from, is you really see that this interior defensive line needs to get beefed up because the Giants now, even when Wink Martindale's defense was carrying this team to competence, stopping the run has been a real issue. Even with Bobby Okereke being a really good signing by Joe Schoen, it's an issue. And so if they can't stop the run, then they're not going to have the ball. Pressures on the offense to score with less time and fewer possessions, right? We know all that, how that equation goes. Bill Hartnett said 100% serious about the price of that hat. I went to buy it and I immediately changed my mind. Yeah, I don't blame you, man. Jeez. Do you have all the players' agents memorized? And if not, where do you look that up? Says Jeff. There's a database that we can look it up as credentialed NFL media. So there's a database for that. Gets updated every so often. Yes, I mean, guys who have. So what happens is you form relationships with agents, and then you know who they have on your team, and then you branch out. You know who they have on other teams. And then it's your job to maintain those relationships. And then also, especially with the Giants, to have a good connection there. And because you want to be players and agents' eyes and ears as well on the field. You want to be sources around the league at different teams, people around the league. Like you want to be able to tell them what's going on. And so, yes, Jeff, you remember and know who these players' agents are. You have a connection to them and lines to them. And you have a constant back and forth there. And it is part of your job. G-Men said, got to get Pat on New York Revival. Let's do it. Dilla says, I stay off Twitter. It's completely useless when it comes to getting an honest opinion about this team. Only reason I use it is for last-minute injury news during the season. Braden says, thanks, Pat. Great to have some to rebound questions off of and feel so connected to the team. Yeah, thank you, Braden. I really do feel like, I think this is not to toot my own horn, but I do think that I can provide something for you guys that is rare, which is a way closer look at the inner workings of my business, but also your team with my relationships with players, coaches, scouts, executives on the Giants and around the league. I think I can give you a really good, better sense and a closer feel to what's going on. And like I said, those live chats we do during the season after the games, those are some of the best things we do because every reporter and person who covers a team, analyst, whatever, everybody has different strengths, right? And things that they latch onto that's like their thing, or what you're good at, or something that makes you good, or you feel like is one of your core qualities. And I feel like on game days, I observe a lot on the field, on the sidelines. I see a lot. There's not a lot I miss. Sometimes I miss stuff, obviously, but I feel like I see the game well. I know what questions to ask after. I know maybe what I need to ask more about that I don't fully understand, even though I saw, right? Those kind of things. And then I see and hear and observe a lot in the locker room. And so I really do think in these conversations, in this community, I can bring a lot to you guys in that respect, seeing and noticing things that other people necessarily won't. And so what I plan to do, and what I did some of last year, is before I put things on Twitter, like now my new routine after games is going to be coming here and telling you guys first. That's going to be what I want to do. Tariq says, Pat, when you talked about the unhinged on social media, I spit my drink out when you said, who are the people I'm serving? You know what I mean? But it's just like, hey, here, I'm trying to bring like news and insight or something. And someone's like, you're a piece of shit and a clown who never should have been, it's like, what? Giants blue blood. It says number of games Drew Lock starts this year. What does your gut tell you? This is a totally wild, like nothing based on anything other than, just the report I've done so far and how things could shake out. I'll say over under. Well, there's the number 7 sticks in my head. The number 7 is in my head. I don't know why. Bill Hartnett says, I put Hefe's positivity post on your announcement for tonight, Pat. That Goff to Jones comparison was a terrible take, says Tariq. D-Kid says, Pat, I think the in-season Talkin Ball live stream will be phenomenal for your subscribers. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, we did it last year, and now that we've really gotten this going and I've been doing this regularly and we've really built something up, I really think this season it's gonna pop and explode. I do agree. Ryan says, young stud pass rushers rarely hit the market because of the importance of the position. When they do, you have to pounce on them. The smart teams use those types of contracts. Look at the Eagles. Ryan, you just said it. I can't say it any better than that. That's a really good point. I'm going to read that again. Really good point by Ryan. He says, young stud pass rushers rarely hit the market because of the importance of the position. When they do, you have to pounce on them. The smart teams use those types of contracts. Look at the Eagles. So he's saying that's what the Giants are doing with Brian Burns, getting that guy in the building, hopefully provides that return. D-Kid says, just remember, Pat, you can go from Bono to Bozo if you fail to continue to deliver great content. Just saying. Hey, D-Kid, nobody knows that better than me, man. I'm the guy who, I report something, I get called a shithead for 6 months. And then on the back end, what I reported actually turns out to be true. And then a few people go, oh, yeah, Pat said that. Hey, good job. After 6 months of me being called a clown and a farce and a fool. Not exactly an even trade-off, Tariq says, keys to enjoying the season as a Giants fan. Stop being delusional. Think baby steps and improvements, and look to a high draft pick in next year's lottery. Dilla says, how much is the hat? I missed it. Bill said it's $42, which nearly knocked me off of my chair. Stanley said, do you think John Mara is being too overbearing on the Giants roster management to a point that it's preventing the team from getting the right players in to be competitive? Stanley, I think that there have been times where the influence of ownership has led to certain poor decisions. I think it's more related to management of, let's say, the end of Eli, related to the hirings of which coaches, the firings of which coaches, the retention of GM Dave Gettleman, the hiring of Dave Gettleman, like some of those overreaching, massive decisions. And then Stanley, it's more like, for example, John Mara thinking we're back after beating Minnesota in the playoffs, and then the Giants feeling last year was going to be a Super Bowl run, and it ends up being a train wreck. The idea of feeling like after a 6-10 season under Joe Judge in 2020, the Giants are like, we're ready. We almost won a bad division. Let's go. And they load up, and then they fall flat on their face and they fire everybody. that impatience is connected to ownership and John Mara, the belief that, oh, wait, here we are. We're close. Like that's a big thing. Braden says, going to college soon in California and want to pursue a job in sports business, specifically football. Any tips or directional advice to succeed in the field? Braden, I would say the NIL and transfer portal, that landscape is really popping and evolving. I think you should study that, like, get close to people at your school who are, try to get close to the football program, try to form some friends in that department, go over to the athletic offices, volunteer to become an intern, get it, and then start to learn the ropes, do whatever they ask you to do, learn from the ground up, get involved. You're young, so don't feel like you're behind if they ask you to do grunt work as an intern. Like that's how it starts, right? If you have any connections, use them, make those phone calls, call in those favors, whatever it is. But there's nothing bigger right now, Braden, in sports than the evolution of college football, as far as like on the horizon, new big stories with how that's going, how it's operating, what it means for the future of college football, NFL football. I would be very interested in that. All these colleges have general managers now, right? That are managing like personnel sides, almost like an NFL team does. So there's opportunities, Braden, to try to get involved on the personnel side in college that weren't there before because of all they're managing now on the NIL and transfer portal side. And that can also provide a pathway potentially to the NFL as well. Jacob says, Pat, you're the best, brother. I know I say this a lot, but no one else is doing this anywhere. No beat writer in any sport does this consistently 2 times a week, allowing fans to have their voices be heard. Thank you, Jacob. And Jacob, you're always here early telling people to like, subscribe. I really appreciate you, man. Ryan says, Pat, big fan of Talkin Ball. Usually miss it live, but always make it to give it a like. You're one of like 2 Giants reporters that are actually good. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you saying that. And thank you for being here live. And if you can't make it live, I really appreciate those views, those likes. And, I try to, if you guys notice, like when you comment on the page, I'm not, sitting there all the time watching, but when I can, I try to jump in and address the comments that are respectful and are inquisitive and intelligent, just the way we do on these chats. Joey B says, I thought Burns was a weird flex. We bring in a stud, but we lose Wink, and we don't address the line, which should be the main focus and position players on offense. We can only root for the defense now. It was different. Jeff says, which was a more uncomfortable interview, Shermer or Kadarius? That's a great question. Uncomfortable for different ways. I mean, definitely Kadarius, but Pat Shermer did have a way of, even when he was trying to, be sociable, things could get uncomfortable, especially if it got, testy. Joey says regular hats are $35 plus tax. So the 100-year hats is going to be more because it's a special edition hat. Yeah, that's brutal though. Dilla says your typical new era fitted hat costs $46 before tax. So I can't say I'm surprised, especially a hat with that kind of significance. Damn. Yeah. That's just how much a hat costs nowadays? I mean, I'm not a huge hat guy. I do own and wear hats, but I'm not buying them left and right. But that just knocked me on my feet. Hey, nowadays you go to the grocery store to pick up a couple of things. It's like $80. So like anything costs it, D-Kid says, last comment, I still have no idea what to expect from Shane Bowen. You got to get an interview with him, mandatory. Agree with that. Bill says, we're all fans here. Pat, tell Tommy I love him. Bill, thanks for that support there with the super sticker. D-Kid says, Bill, you're starting to worry me. You guys are so funny. Terry says, do you think this season feels similar to the playoff year? Remember, we thought we were going to have the worst record that year. Terry, the Giant, yeah, you could surprise some people. I mean, it's, you're changing a lot of your identity on the fly. So, you're going from Saquon Barkley is facing the franchise away to Malik Neighbors, 20-year-old wide receiver, but he's explosive. I do think there's a lot of pressure on what they have to do this year, which creates sometimes a lot of tension to it versus like year one, there was no pressure on them, right? Like nobody, like, There was no pressure on them last year or in 2022. This year, people expect them to be bad, but also there is a lot of pressure on them to be good. That's tough. There was no pressure on them to be good in 2022. Now there is. So I would say that is the difference, and that's what feels different. Tariq says Joe Shane has to stop trading away draft picks like Oprah giveaways. This is not good. Bill says I am built different, D-Kit. I'm old and I can't wrap my head around recent prices for stuff. No, listen, that's a lot of money. Even if that's what is going rate for a hat nowadays, that's a lot of money for a hat. Like, come on. Noel says, what's going on, Pat? I don't get why people are so down on the Giants not drafting O-line in the draft. They signed quite a few in free agency. Plus, Priscilla can still work with the young Carolina O-lineman. Yeah, I mean, right. They do have young guys that Priscilla can work with and try to get the most out of. I do think they are missing a swing tackle on their roster, though, Noel, and that's coming from people who know more about O-lines than me as well. That's my opinion, too, but it's coming from, experts who I trust who know the game and feel like that's what they need to kind of settle in and have some good depth to avoid some of the disasters they had last year. But, you bring up a fair point, which is that this organization or this front office has made its bed in certain respects as far as we've added a certain talent to the building that we identified. So we're going to live or die with it, basically. So let's try to make it better what we have. That said, there were guys that could help them, like a guy like Cooper Beebe, who, Dallas drafted, I thought was a guy who could help them maybe at guard, things like that. Alex says, if Jones starts week 1, how short is his leash? If his play is poor, how long does he stay on the field? Could a benching mid-game in week 1 be a reality, or does he at least get a few games? Alex, I think the pressure on Brian Dabol means that it's a short leash. Now, mid-game week 1, boy, oh boy, that would be epic mismanagement. Because if you're prepared to bench Daniel Jones in week 1 mid-game if he struggles, then he shouldn't be your starter, right? So that's what I would say. I would say if you're at that point with that short of a leash, then just start Drew Lock, right, at that point. But I do think he'll have a short leash if he struggles in general, based on the fact that they need to win games, especially the head coach. Simeon says they should have made the hat an even $100 for the anniversary. Deilla says, based on the schedule, the teams I think we have a shot against are the Panthers, Saints, Commanders, Dallas, we might beat once, Vikings because of QB play, Browns again, QB play, Falcons maybe. That's fair. That's fair. I'll be very interested to see how this all lays out. We look forward to that. Simeon says the swing lineman will be Evan Neal after he loses that starting job. Yeah, but can he be a swing lineman for them? That's the question. Reliable, Kyle says, Pat, do you think Tyler Newman will start? Yes, I do. And I think drafting a safety in the second round, I know they had a need at safety, quote unquote, after letting McKinney walk. But to be honest with you, I thought, they needed a corner more given what their secondary looked like. And drafting Newman, to me and to others I've talked to, seems to suggest they do not view Dane Belton as the guy who's just going to jump up and grab that job and start there. Because otherwise, if you view him that way, then you're not doing that, right? I mean, that's what you would think. So, yes, I do think he starts. Dilla says he better start. He's a second-round pick. Joey B says, Pat, have a good night. I have a head cold kicking my ass as if I was DJ. Can't wait to catch up more this week with the lives and this weekend at the game. Looking forward to it, Joey. Yep, at the softball game. The next live, everybody, will be Wednesday for the schedule release, 8 p.m. Pat, do you know if Evan Neal did more training in the offseason with Willie Anderson again? Does he look like he got any offseason gains like Thibodeau? Terry, I'm not sure yet. I do have to get back in front of Evan at OTA. So later in May, I'll be able to answer that question. Ryan says, hey, Chat and Pat, which teams have a better pass rushing defensive line than the Giants starters? Let's see. Let's look at these teams. I mean, probably the Eagles, the The Raiders, I mean, you have to remember, like if a team has, like the Cleveland Browns have Myles Garrett, the Chiefs have Chris Jones, right? The Pittsburgh Steelers have TJ Watt. Like there's a lot of these teams that, like Jeffrey Simmons on the Titans, like there are teams that have a better pass rush than, and I know Dexter Lawrence has been a second team All-Pro and has really grown these last couple of years, and especially in 2022 was an extremely dominant player. But any of these teams with like elite A-list guys who change games down in and down out, it's tough to be better pass rushes than them unless one of your guys, balls out all the time. Right. Dilla says Dallas is strong too. That's right. So, yeah, no doubt. No, I agree with you. So, yeah, I think the Giants have a potential to be an explosive and dominant pass rush, but we need to see it. It's not that yet. It's what we need to see. Braden says, thanks for the words. Unsure if I want to pursue the media or business side. Used to play and love the game, and I have a deep knowledge of it. I want to be surrounded by it. What pathway do you suggest? You could get into a lot of different options and feel it out, Braden, in college. Like there's no pressure on you to do anything immediate. I would say, Braden, nowadays, anybody can get on social media, do some videos. Like, for example, if you have an Instagram account, you could just, or TikTok or whatever, you could start practicing, or even if you do on YouTube, you could do YouTube shorts or Instagram reels where you talk about sports. Like if you want to get in the rhythm of doing reports and being on the media side and talking about football, or maybe you consider yourself someone who knows the game well enough to be a scout. So you could give, here's Braden's scouting take on, Jamar Chase. Here's Braden's scouting take on DK Metcalf, whatever it is. But get reps at whatever you want to do. What pathway would I suggest? I would say, I don't know. It just depends on your, do you gravitate to administration? Do you gravitate to coaching? Do you gravitate towards just talking about the game? Braden, send me an email. I'm at pleonard@nydailynews.com. pleonard@nydailynews.com. We can talk about it more there. Dilla says, I still hate that we passed on A.D. Mitchell, regardless of us drafting neighbors in the first. Wide receiver 1, 2 would have undoubtedly been set for a good period of time. Interesting. Let's see. Tariq says, 100 years of Giants football, and they never had a black franchise quarterback or head coach do the right thing. That was certainly an interesting part of Tyrod Taylor stepping in and starting, as well as the Geno Smith, obviously, replacing Eli Manning way back when. Alex says, another question. I remember the last live I was in, you expressed some concerns over Neighbor's maturity, given that he's only 20. Do you think his reaction to the poor QB play could be problematic? I think that, yes, I think there's a possibility that bad offense and a lack of touches could lead to that based on, potential immaturity issues. That's a possibility. Yeah. The Giants need to have a better offense for him to be in a good mood too. And that would go for anybody, right? Bill counters Tariq with, come on, man. If we had the pick, Caleb would have been a Giant. This is BS. Yes, he would have. Pat, do you have any more information that hasn't been brought to light on the Slayton situation, Dilla said. Not at the moment, Dilla, no. But I will work to get more, and maybe I'll have something for you on Wednesday. Guys, we just went almost 2 hours and 40 minutes. Amazing chat. As always, you guys are the best. Thank you so much for all the super chats and super stickers. D-Kit, Bill, J-Jan, Big Dash, Ryan, all of you guys and everybody who asked, reminded everyone to subscribe and hit the like button. All of your questions and anybody who was watching, really appreciate you. Remember, some things coming this week. We have, so in order, we have Wednesday night, May 15th, 8 p.m., Giants and NFL schedule release. We're going to do a special live edition of Talkin Ball on Wednesday to break down the schedule together. Looking forward to that. Still planning on doing one on Thursday. We'll see if that changes based on how much we cover on Wednesday. But as of right now, still planning on doing one on Thursday. We also on, let's see, I want to make sure I get the details of this right. So on Thursday, May 16th, Gary Myers wrote Once a Giant, the book over my shoulder here. And he has a book signing at Bookends Bookstore in Ridgewood, New Jersey at 6 o'clock p.m., Thursday, May 16th. Leonard Marshall and Harry Carson, both 1986 Super Bowl champion Giants, will be there with Gary at this book signing in Ridgewood. So that's at Bookends Bookstore, Thursday, May 16th, 6 p.m., Once a Giant by Gary Myers. Get out to that if you can. And then Saturday is the Dexter Lawrence softball charity at Clover Stadium in Pomona, New York. SexyDexyGame.com. But stay tuned because tomorrow, Tuesday, May 14th, we are dropping our new podcast with Brandon Jacobs. I think you guys will love the interview. Brandon's as entertaining as ever. Still looks like someone that nobody would like to tackle. Has some good stories about that and gets you primed for the softball game and talks a lot of Giants and NFL. So that's great. Yes, 8 o'clock Wednesday. Braden, send me an email. Appreciate you. Deilla says, thanks for the time as always, Pat. Appreciate it. Bill says, thanks for the show, Pat. Glad the whole damn family showed up. No doubt. More and more that's happening. Alex says, it's been real, Pat. Remember to have one more drink before bed. We're Giants fans after all. That's right. The only reason I didn't have alcohol in my hand tonight is because I had just played basketball and I was thirsty. I had to hydrate. D-Kit says, great show, Pat. Thank you, D-Kit. We'll get out on that. Reminder, we are sponsored by BetOnline and also by Estate 98 Coffee. It's an Essencia Day Cafe from El Salvador. Dates back to 1798. Takes 3 seconds to make an iced coffee. I drink it all the time when I'm doing the Talkin Ball pods during the day and I need some juice. Thank you so much for being here. See you Wednesday for the Talkin Ball live schedule release breakdown here on the Pat Leonard YouTube page at PL on NFL. Thank you, everybody. It's been great. See you soon.